The Elemental Wizard of Hogwarts Chapter 161-180. Chapter 161 _ Sterling and Gold Galleons. Hearing Jin Yi's words, the figure named Falang was stunned for a moment. Jin, who was wearing a golden mask, couldn't see any expression, but the noise in the background sound could not avoid falling into the ears of the man named Falang. Jin Yi, what happened when you fell to the ground? What happened to your falling to the ground? Fran asked in a panic. What happened? Frank, are you pretending to be confused with me or are you really confused? I listened to your information and fought back the Muggles. I was waiting for the cooperation of your Ministry of Magic to throw out a few dark wizards. Why did I wait for the Order of the Phoenix instead of the Ministry of Magic? Jin Yi looked at the middle-aged man in the mirror fiercely, and the middle-aged man immediately panicked when he heard Jin Yi's words. How is that possible? Dumbledore is still wrangling in the Ministry of Magic so far. Besides, how did the Order of the Phoenix appear in France? The middle-aged man codenamed Frank was completely panicked at this moment. Hearing that Jin Yi is a goblin, but at the moment he feels his blood pressure is rising. Collection is not good. Chisaba Henry, I don't have time to argue with you here, tell me what happened recently. Jin Yi was already furious at this time, looking at the fat middle-aged man with big ears in the mirror, and finally he directly name was called. The middle-aged man obviously knew what it meant to be called out by his name. His face became abnormally pale, and he shivered to drag out everything that had happened since Charles came to France. Hearing what he wanted, Jin Yi felt that his blood pressure was a little higher. Who would have thought that he would fall short because of a Zuluer who had not yet entered the laboratory? While Jin Yi was still thinking, the man's cry came from the mirror again. Jin Yi, help me, please, for the sake of our relationship for so many years, help me. I don't want to go. Jail. Hearing the man's cries, Jin immediately became furious and roared in front of the mirror, you don't want to go to jail. Chisaba Henry, tell me, what should I do now? Jin Chi discovered Voldemort in his early years, and he was on the rise in Parliament, and now he is guarding Voldemort's Horcrux with ease. As long as the time is up, Jin Chi can release Voldemort again at any time, and even if he doesn't release it, he can keep a guard. What about me, and me? Conscientious and conscientious, I finally saw that the evil dragon was almost finished, but now it has fallen short because of your laziness. Evil dragons are just a bunch of useless pieces of meat. Save you, okay, how about placing your soul in the body of the evil dragon? This way we can continue to work together. Jin Yi's words, at this time Chisaba Henry was so scared that he was about to wet his pants, and he was completely speechless. Sat down slowly, and then said. I tell you, Chisaba Henry, you cut off the way for me to become Jin'er, and your laziness cut off the way for your family. Honestly, take the blame after the fact, otherwise, the last term you should also know what the consequences of Franks are. The Council of the Chaotic Country is not a good person. You can only keep a secret if you die, and you can also protect your family. After he finished speaking, Chisaba Henry threw off the mirror and threw himself in the soft chair with a headache and began to think. Obviously, the starting point of the whole thing was the Zulu in his hand. The original target of the attack on the port was this Zulu. Jin Yi's idea was actually very simple. Usually, Zulu is looked at very seriously by the rabbits. Last time, one finally came out, but it ended up in Newt's hands. Now there is another one, but it is still related to Newt. No, maybe not just Newt. Dumbledore probably already knew of his existence, otherwise Dumbledore wouldn't have procrastinated in the French Ministry of Magic, or his existence was not known by Dumbledore, just delaying the footsteps of the purebloods who cover themselves. For a while, Jin Yi had a headache, and he couldn't help but feel a little jealous of Jin Chi's cooperation with Sterling. If he had a helper similar to Sterling, I am afraid that he would have replaced Jin Chi in the headquarters. Thinking of this, Jin Yi sighed. He didn't know how he would be punished by the council for his mistake this time. He had just been promoted to Jin Galleon. Where Jin Yi was thinking wildly, the door of the office was knocked open. It was Yin Yi. Master Jin, the matter has been dealt with, now we are waiting for your order, we have to hurry up and prepare to evacuate, upstairs is already it's about to come in. Hearing Yin-Yi's words, Jin-Yi could only reorganize his emotions, stood up and said to Yin-Yi, you are running to send that Zulu out, that Zulu is still here with us, this gang people will never stop the investigation. When you come back, we will go directly to the parliament. I need to go to the parliament and report the situation truthfully. Quote. After finishing speaking, Jin-Yi sighed and did it again, a little decadently. Yin-Yi wanted to say something at first, but he finally held back. He called a copper nut at random and ordered to go down and send Zulu up. After I finished speaking, I came to the center of the square, a huge device similar to a portal. As long as this device is activated, the so-called fairy creation here will be teleported away, and the entire space will return to the original line at the same time. Developed. In other words, this huge space secretly developed by the goblins will return to its original state of being filled with dirt, which is what all goblins call, blow up. After all, for greedy goblins, restoring anything made by hand is a kind of heart-piercing pain. Think of Gryffindor's sword. This is the pain of all goblins to this day. With the return of the last copper nut, the huge machine in the center of the square began to rotate slowly, making a humming sound, slowly starting to rotate faster and faster, and gradually a blue light curtain began to spread continuously. In the end, the blue light curtain gradually shrouded all the things made by the goblin, not even the elevator of Jin-Yi, and then with a small sound, everything shrouded by the blue light disappeared. Now, there is still a huge amount of soil that was replaced, and the space of the elevator slowly began to shrink with the disappearance of the blue light, and finally turned into a pipe well. If someone opened the whole space now, they would find that there was no space at all, and even the soil was no different from the surrounding. Chapter 162-Validation and Follow-up. Seal didn't know anything about what was going on underground. At this time, Seal didn't care what happened underground. The reason was very simple. Hermione with her ponytail and heroic appearance had already landed in front of Seal. Seal watched as Hermione landed in front of him with a hint of excitement on his face, and his heart was mixed for a while. Hermione looked more like a lolicon treatment machine. So Seal came up with a bold idea. In order to verify that Hermione is still Hermione, combined with the concept of traveling through the lolicon treatment machine, Seal decided to find an opportunity to secretly kiss the heroic girl in front of him. If it's really a man, there shouldn't be any shy scenes, right? This idea lingered in Seal's mind, and even began to spread wildly. The result was that Seal stared blankly at Hermione who had just landed. Hermione didn't think so much at this time. After all, this was the first time that her own idea had gone ahead of Seal. Seeing Seal's dazed look, Hermione even looked at Seal with some pride. In the depths of my heart, I roared proudly, "How is it, stupid?" Seal was shocked by me. Seeing Seal's dumbfounded expression, Hermione couldn't hold back in the end. The corners of her mouth were slightly raised, and she looked at Seal with a hint of pride. "What's the matter, Seal? Is there any problem?" After hearing Hermione's answer, Seal gradually calmed down and shook his head dully. Hermione's smile grew even stronger when he saw Seal's appearance. Ignoring Seal, he turned around sassily, and was about to go to the two fathers. The hearts of the two fathers were also full of pride at this time. After all, whether it was Seal or Hermione, in the eyes of the two fathers, they were their own children. Western society is a country that advocates individual heroism. At this time, whether it is Shire or Hermione, in the eyes of the two fathers, they are all heroes. Just as Hermione was happily walking forward, Hermione suddenly heard Seal calling her from behind. So she turned her head almost instinctively, and then Hermione felt as if her lips had touched something soft. Shire was also stunned at this time. This is different from the script. Originally, what Seal wanted was to follow behind Hermione and call out to Hermione. When Hermione turned her head, she could just kiss Hermione's face, so that she could verify whether Hermione was being attacked by something strange. Things are possessed, and this is how it is played in idol dramas. But I didn't expect the script to develop like this at all. For a time, Neither Hermione nor Shire nor the two fathers were so shocked that they didn't know what to say. In the end, Hermione reacted quickly and pushed Seal away at once, and then the visible face quickly flushed red, and Seal seemed to see the steam on Hermione's head vaguely. It wasn't until Hermione pushed him away that Seal reacted, and immediately began to explain falteringly, "Hermione, no, listen to my explanation." But no matter how Seal explained it, Hermione stared at the ground with a shy face and red face, as if there was something fun on the ground that could keep people's eyes away. On the contrary, the expressions of the two fathers are very wonderful. Mr. William has a look that my pigs will finally bow to the cabbage. Feel. While several people were still in a large-scale family ethics love drama, a white platypus slowly flew down from midair, slammed into the ground and disappeared. Newt's tired voice came from the disappearing platypus. "Charles, Hermione, come down, it's over, we have found Zoo-woo too." Hermione heard Newt's voice as if she had finally found a savior, and hurriedly walked down the mountain with her head lowered and fast steps. Seal just wanted to go up and stop them from going together, when Mr. Granger slapped him on the shoulder with a dark face. "Superior." Seal patted his hand on his shoulder, but when he looked up, he saw Mr. Granger's smiling face that seemed to have climbed out of hell, and Seal didn't dare to move immediately. In the end, Mr. Granger didn't say anything, only left one sentence, "You are still too young," and then followed Hermione's footsteps down the mountain. Compared with others, at this time, Mr. Granger was more concerned about his daughter and his daughter. How far has that stinky boy progressed? Seal hadn't reacted yet, and his father patted Seal on the shoulder, but he didn't say anything, just gave Seal a look of, "I'm looking after you," and then whistled, carrying the naked eye as happy to go down the mountain. Only Charles was at a loss. In the end, Seal saw his Zoo-woo at Newt under the mountain. The little one was like a kitten. At this time, the little Zoo-woo was unconscious in the cage. Zhang Jiwei and Newt discussed it for a while, and decided to bring Xiao Zoo-woo back to Newt's house first, and then Zhang Jiwei would bring him back to the flower gardening house when Xiao Zoo-woo recovered. For this proposal, both Seal and Hermione agreed with both hands. Strictly speaking, both of them are cat controllers, not to mention that Xiao Zoo-woo is difficult to be cute. Oh, by the way, both Hermione and Seal didn't say anything about Ciel's hooliganism, as if the incident just now didn't exist. Of course, this may also be due to Mr. Granger's credit. Anyway, after Seal went down the mountain for the last time, he saw Hermione's face as usual, which made Seal wonder for a while whether the soft touch on his lips was a dream. After that, things were very simple. Newt took a group of people to control all the dark wizards who fell unconscious on the ground, and then searched all the houses upside down, but unfortunately, except for those with wizards. Research notes. Newt and everyone found nothing, not even the traces of Muggle life. For a time, Newt began to doubt whether the Kingdom of Chaos that Dumbledore said really existed. In desperation, Newt could only contact Dumbledore through Fawkes. When Dumbledore arrived with a large group of members of the Ministry of Magic, only Newt, the Shire family and the Hermione family were left at the scene. All the wizards of the Ministry of Magic were surprised that Newt could defeat so many dark wizards, and said that Newt's face was flushed, but because of Dumbledore's reasons, he had to bite the bullet and respond. Finally, under the pressure of Dumbledore and the international magic secrecy, the entire French Ministry of Magic joined some Muggle secret departments to launch a large-scale investigation, and finally locked down a pure-blood aristocrat named Shisaba Henry. At this time, Seal, who was already at Newt's house and Hermione taking turns Zoo-woo, twitched the corner of his mouth to express his disbelief here. Chapter 163-Zoo-woo's departure and travel. Zoo-woo, who has been staying at Newt's house for almost 3 days, is now back alive under Newt's care. For the two people who like Meow, Zoo-woo's magical appearance and how close he is to a cat, the character has already made the two of them not very hopeful that Zoo-woo will leave. What's more, for some unknown reason, Zoo-woo seemed to like Seal more. Every time he approached Seal, the little spark on his neck would not break, which made Hermione jealous. You must know that no matter what animal it was, it was very cute when she was a child. Seeing that Zhou was more pro-chair, Hermione was itching, and she could only wave the small fish that Seal prepared for Crookshanks. Seduce Xiao Zuwu. Whenever this situation happened, Seal couldn't help feeling distressed for Crookshanks, who was still waiting for Hermione at the pet shop. Of course, happy days are short-lived. Today is the day when Xiao Zuwu left. Xiao Zuwu continued to resist in Zhang Jiwei's arms, trying to escape into Sha Er's arms. Although the original agreement was based on Zuwu's own choice, when Sha Er saw Xiao Zuwu comatose in the cage, thinking that there were still a pair of parents waiting for Xiao Zuwu at home, Sha Er still couldn't bear to stay. Little Zuwu. After all, it's better for underage children to stay with their parents, whether it's Seal, Hermione, or both groups of parents think so. Of course, Dumbledore also appeared at such an important moment. Out of the friendship between the two countries, Dumbledore provided 2 door keys with the old magic wand. Some people must say why there are 2, there is no way, even the combination of Dumbledore and the Elder Wand can't span half the world at once, and now it only takes 1 transfer to reach the White Elephant country near the plateau as the limit. This is the landmark that Dumbledore traveled and wrote down when he was young. Seeing the 2-in-1 beast disappear into the living room, Sha Er felt a little empty for a while. He hoped that Miao Fu would remember the autographed photo. Sha Er could only comfort himself like this for a while. This side of Seal hasn't calmed down yet. Dumbledore is also saying goodbye to everyone. After all, he still has a lot of things to deal with. There are a group of goblins in the dark. Dumbledore also feels that he has more and more things to do. He wanted to turn 1 hour into 2 hours, so after finishing the last thing, before Seal didn't think about his phoenix, it was time to run away. Of course, Seal also saw Dumbledore's thoughts and didn't stop him. After all, he planned to continue to play in France for a while, and his trip to France was messed up because of these messy things. At this moment, Seal of course, I am unwilling. Although it is convenient to take Fox, some Muggle attractions are absolutely not to be thought of. Shire, who had only been to some Asian countries in his last life, was still very interested in his French travels, so he didn't say anything. After all, Dumbledore could run as a monk but couldn't run away from the temple. When school started, there was time to fool Fox. What I'm a little puzzled about is why Dumbledore finally winked at Newt. After thinking about it for a long time, Seal, who didn't understand it, could only be regarded as naughty among the old people. As for the parents of the 2 families, the 4 parents originally wanted to go home directly. After all, a lot of things happened, and several parents felt physically and mentally exhausted. It became a revenge play idea. So the family said goodbye to the Newt family and happily drove into the city in their small RV. At this time, Paris had returned to its former liveliness. The people who were parading in the streets had vanished at this time because they had lost their leaders, as well as the guidance of the Ministry of Magic and the Muggle government. Charles and Hermione were sitting by the window, looking at Paris, which had become a romantic capital, and both of them couldn't help but smile. It is completely in line with Shire's previous reverie for Europe. At the same time, a few people started a crazy tour. For a few days, the RV roamed wildly in the streets of Paris, the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, the Champs-Élysées. A few people did not let go, and took a whole picture. 4 submitted photographs. Shire and Hermione even patted their chests and said that after returning to the UK, they would go to Diagon Alley to develop the photos into magic photos, the kind that move. Of course, what satisfies Charles the most is the French cuisine. For Charles, who still retains the habits of his previous life, if he eats badly during travel, it can be said that he has lost the general pleasure of traveling. Feel the taste of Paris. In general, everyone is very satisfied these days. The 3 ladies bought their favorite items on the Champs-Élysées, and the 3 men also ate their mouths full of oil on the streets of France, so that everyone felt a little unfulfilled. In the end, it was Harry's letter that woke up the 2 families who were intoxicated in the Parisian style. Charles looked at the letter and looked at the tired Hedwig, feeling sympathy for Harry for a while. That's right, while Ciel's side is arguably colorful and thrilling, Harry's sight is still the same as the original, serving dishes at home and accidentally blowing up his aunt. Looking at the contents of Harry's letter, Charles couldn't help but hold a second of silence for the poor little boy. Then Charles agreed to Harry's invitation to gather at the Leaky Cauldron to visit Diagon Alley before school started, amid Hermione's nagging. Seeing Hedwig flying away with the letter in his mouth, Charles knew that his trip to France was about to come to an end. Thinking of this, Charles suddenly remembered what Dumbledore said about the surprise, and he didn't read it at all. Okay. There are a lot of frights. When Seal thought of this, he suddenly knew why Dumbledore left in a hurry, and feelings were waiting for him here. For a while, Shire felt a little pain in the ass, missed the opportunity. After the consultation of the incumbent parents, it was decided to start returning to the UK tomorrow morning, so this evening can be said to be the last night for several people in Paris. It was also a coincidence that the original carnival was postponed for a long time because of the parade a few days ago, and Charles looked at the day and found that it happened to be today. In addition, Hermione seemed to be very interested in the Magic Street in Paris, so several people were automatically divided into groups and decided to play their own for the last night. Charles looked at Hermione, who was reading a book about the introduction to the French Magic Street in the mild sunlight of the afternoon, and then looked at the two parents who were a little excited and a little tired. When I go back, I will have one more brother or sister. Chapter 164-Carnival and Fright. After making an appointment to pick up Shire and Hermione, the two parents couldn't wait to send them to the entrance of Magic Street and drove away. Seal was also speechless for a while, and he didn't know whether to say something big or what to say. Anyway, it just happened. After watching the RV turn a corner and disappear in front of his eyes, Seal turned to look at Hermione. For some reason, Hermione, who was still very cheerful at first, became so nervous and shy when she was alone with Seal after her parents left, and she didn't know what she was thinking of. At this time, Seal didn't notice Hermione's abnormality. He took Hermione's hand and started walking into the Magic Street. After all, they didn't have much time. The sun was about to go down at this time. If you participate in the carnival at night, you will be in a hurry here in Magic Street. Hermione was holding hands by Seal, but she didn't resist, but her face turned a little redder. Of course, this shyness was replaced by excitement the moment she entered the Magic Street. Although I have been here once, Charles still has to sigh about the atmosphere of France. Compared with the small alleys of Diagon Alley, this Magic Street is a real street. There are many merchants on both sides, and it doesn't look much different from the Muggle commercial street, but they are buying magic goods. What excites them the most is that the Magic Street at this time is actually brightly lit up. It seems that the carnival is not only Muggles, it seems wizards are also involved. Hermione took Seal to start a family look. Of course, neither Seal nor Hermione had much nostalgia in the bookstore this time. After all, French books still didn't look as good as English, didn't they? But the two still found a lot of magical gadgets. Seal bought Hermione a hair tie that could bloom. The hair tie would bloom according to the director's mood. Sometimes it was a magnolia, sometimes it was a rose. Min and the two studied for a while and found no pattern. The two of them simply stopped studying. Anyway, Hermione's head was tied up with this random flower that bloomed. Hermione also bought a small gift for Seal, a small grass hairpin, just like the grass on the head of the village chief in Happy and Grey Wolf. The grass will grow and bloom wildly, but when Seal is in a daze, the grass will slowly recover by itself. Both Seal and Hermione were very interested in this magical gadget. Seal was thinking about math problems in his head for a while, and then let go of his brain again, and Hermione laughed constantly. Soon night fell. Almost instantly, the street was full of people, and colorful lanterns floated in the air, illuminating the entire street. Shire and Hermione joined hands on the street and followed the carnival crowd and began to sing and dance. From time to time, some people in the crowd pulled out their wands and performed their own little party magic spells, winning the applause of the people around them. Suddenly, a gorgeous fireworks bloomed in the sky, and the people around stopped their carnival footsteps and stared at the flashing fireworks above their heads. The Muggles who went to the carnival were all looking up at the fleeting beauty of the sky. Seal and Hermione were no exception. The gorgeous fireworks in the sky seemed to be compensating for the messy start in France. "Charles, we'll always be this beautiful, right?" Hermione whispered for a while, as if asking Charles, but also asking herself. Hearing Hermione's words, Seal glanced at the girl beside him, then looked at the fireworks in the sky, and answered Hermione's question in a very firm tone. "Yes, I will do my best to protect this beauty." Hermione's smile grew even bigger when she heard Seal's answer, and she felt that Seal seemed to have a little more strength in her hands, and Hermione's heart was filled with a sense of security for a while. "Let's go, it's getting late, we should go to the next carnival, otherwise there won't be enough time." After finishing speaking, Hermione took the initiative to drag Seal and started to walk outside the magic street. Seal, who was walking behind Hermione, felt the excitement of the girl, and his smile became even stronger. This beauty is exactly what Seal had to protect with all his might. What Seal didn't know was that when Seal strengthened his beliefs because of Hermione, a crisp sound came from the Seal in the depths of his soul. To death, Seal was not indulging in the beauty that Hermione gave at this time. If you can't extricate yourself, you will find that the unbreakable Seal of Slytherin has a crack at this time. Of course, for Seal, the beauty at this time is really hard to forget, so that the two of them who were thinking about each other didn't realize that a man in black robes was behind them. Strict people followed behind the two of them. Hermione took hard to squeeze out the carnival crowd and came to the exit. At this time, the crowd was all in the street, but the exit seemed deserted and empty. A stark contrast was formed. It was as if they had traveled from one world to another in an instant, and the two little animals felt a little uncomfortable with this feeling for a while. Just as the two little ones stood at the intersection of the street and were still stunned, a black robe flew over from behind in an instant, and it was very accurate to cover the two little ones at once. Seal was startled by this change, and subconsciously hugged Hermione in his arms and threw him on the ground. The moment he fell to the ground, Seal hugged Hermione and rolled in one, trying to avoid the next step's attack. But this behavior also caused an unforeseen consequence. The black robe entangled the two at once. Helpless, Seal could only protect Hermione stubbornly, praying that Hermione would not suffer any harm. However, the magic spell that I expected had hurt Seal and I didn't feel it at all, but I felt the attack of an old fist. The attack of one punch, and one punch could accurately locate the delicate face of Seal even through the black robe. This old fist knocked Seal all of a sudden. Under the chaos, Seal even began to doubt his life. He originally thought it was the revenge of the dark wizards in the chaotic country, but when did these black wizards learn to talk about sap? Fortunately, Hermione reacted quickly, and hid in Seal's arms and struggled frantically, and finally touched the wand that Seal put in his pocket. The man's black robe was torn apart. It was amazing to say that the wand, which had been ignored by anyone except Seal, miraculously responded to Hermione's magic this time. In an instant, the black robe became fragmented, and Seal finally got out of this old fist. When Seal was desperate to see who hit him with the sap, the person who appeared in front of Seal made Seal's mouth shut in surprise. Chapter 165-Johnny Depp. Of Seal was Gellert Grindelwald himself. At this time, Grindelwald shaved off his beard and dyed his black hair. He looked a lot younger, but his body was straight. The extremely baggy suit is still worn on the body. At this time, even though there were thousands of questions in Seal's heart, they were suppressed by the nameless fire of that old fist. When Seal was beaten, he felt a familiar feeling. You must be familiar with the stuff. After all, after a summer vacation, can you not be familiar with it? Before Seal got angry, Grindelwald, who was standing by the old god, spoke first. Stinky boy, I haven't seen you for a year, and I have become dull. How did I teach you? Always maintain the most basic vigilance. Now what about vigilance? Seeing Grindelwald bite back first, Seal felt that his blood pressure suddenly rose. Before Seal could scold him back, Hermione, who was pointing at Grindelwald with Ciel's wand, was the first to ask a question. "Charles, do you know him?" One sentence immediately woke Ciel. It was as if he had been poured with cold water from start to finish in dog days. She did know Grindelwald, but if she wanted to talk about her name, she knew Hermione too, and she didn't care. Fucking cooked batch. As a result, Charles immediately calmed down. His brain began to run fast, and he answered Hermione's question eagerly. "Ah, I do know him. He is the teacher that Dumbledore helped me find during last summer vacation, and his name is Johnny Depp." Hearing Ciel's answer, Hermione looked suspiciously at the grass growing wildly above Ciel's head, and looked suspiciously at Grindelwald who was standing beside the old god. Grindelwald saw Charles look at him suspiciously, and replied without blushing, "Yes, I'm Johnny Depp, you can just call me Depp, I think you must be Charles' girlfriend, Hermione. I heard about you all summer last summer." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Hermione's face turned red all of a sudden, like a ripe apple. "It's not. It's not." After speaking, Hermione ignored Ciel and Grindelwald and ran out of the alley while covering her face. Seeing Hermione running away, Shire was a little helpless. After making an international friendly gesture at Grindelwald, he quickly turned around and chased after him. Grindelwald was not angry. Pointing at a German restaurant on the side of the road with a finger, he said with his mouth, "Where is waiting for you?" 10 minutes later, Ciel sat down opposite Grindelwald, who was feasting, with a blushing Hermione. Ciel had countless questions in his heart that he wanted to ask the old man on the opposite side, but Hermione could only use very obscure words to slowly set Grindelwald's words here. Charles looked at Grindelwald who was elegantly eating pork knuckle, and asked cautiously, "Teacher, when did you come out?" Grindelwald seemed a little excited when he heard Shire's teacher, and laughed, "Stinky boy, it's all right, I'll tell you if I say this to you, teacher." After speaking, she simply glanced at Hermione, who was looking at her curiously with a blushing face. Hermione immediately felt that her eyelids were getting heavier and heavier, and she fell asleep on Ciel's body after a while. Passed. Seeing Grindelwald's movements, Ciel didn't stop him. After all, there were some things that Hermione should not know, so he carefully adjusted his posture so that Hermione could sleep more comfortably. After seeing that Hermione was asleep, Ciel looked at Grindelwald, waiting for Grindelwald's answer. Grindelwald wiped his mouth gracefully, then continued, "Okay, your little girlfriend is asleep, so let's get down to business." After speaking, regardless of Ciel's reaction, he continued, "Where should I start? Oh, by the way, let's start when I see Dumbledore again. At that time, you avoided it and didn't know it. After Dumbledore saw me, it was just a simple reminiscence, and he explained to me a plan, a particularly huge plan, which can even be described as crazy. You know, if this plan can be successful, then the current pattern of the magic circle will be completely changed." At that time, I was actually not interested in the future described by Dumbledore at all, and even looked at it with a tinge of contempt. After all, for more than 1,000 years, not everyone has been a revolutionary, but without exception, they all failed. The relationship between the entire magic circle is like a big net that is constantly being cut and chaotic. It is still too difficult to change, let alone two old men. I was really dismissive of it, but Dumbledore suggested that I should go to the Far East, just for the sake of my only heir, you, Charles, Dumbledore was almost begging said to me. My heart softened, whether it was you or him. At that moment, my heart, who was already dead, softened, and my heart that was plain as water seemed to have a small flame saying to me, "Go and see." I promised Dumbledore that after you and him were gone, I would pack up and embark on the journey alone. When Grindelwald said this, Ciel couldn't help but ask, "Teacher, you're not afraid that someone will recognize you, so you just went out like this?" Hearing Ciel's question, Grindelwald smiled, "Yes, I just went out like this. Time is the most terrible magic. Ciel, I'm so old that many people don't recognize me. Even so, I was still careful, using the compound decoction to restrain my forte." After speaking, I didn't forget to ignite a small flame at the fingertips to show Ciel. After seeing Ciel's expression, "I got it, don't worry," Grindelwald looked a little embarrassed. After looking around and finding that no one paid attention to his small movements, he coughed before continuing. "Cough, go on. I followed Dumbledore's advice and went to that country in the Far East, and soon I discovered one thing. Although that country was going through a split due to some incompetence of Muggles, but none of them were listed. The wizards were unusually united. Can you imagine Shire? Obviously there are no leaders, but all the wizards are gathered together as if they have faith. The feeling is very familiar, and even made me suspicious for a while, and another me appeared in that cold place. But soon I found out I was wrong. And so wrong. Do you know, Shire, I thought that Muggles and wizards were two entities that would never mix, but I was wrong. It's so wrong. Where did I see the possibility that Dumbledore said?" Chapter 166-Dumbledore's Plan and Grindelwald's Chaos. Ciel looked at Grindelwald across from him with some amusing. As a good young man from a rabbit family in his previous life, of course Ciel knew the collective feeling that everyone is working hard to do one thing well. Don't talk about this kind of behavior. Now, even decades later, the Western world is shocked. Ciel waved his hand and smiled without interrupting Grindelwald's memory. Grindelwald calmed down and said, "That was a disaster. A disaster that will definitely destroy the world if it is not controlled properly. Ciel, you will never see that kind of scene. Everyone has only one identity, human. It is a spirit that does not distinguish between Muggles and wizards. Muggles are using their lives to prevent disasters. Although wizards save their lives, the price is to become Muggles forever." Even so, everyone did not turn back, and no one escaped. I felt Far East at that time. When I saw this scene from a distance, do you know how shocked I was in my heart, Shire? Hearing Grindelwald's words, Ciel did not refute, but the smile on the corner of his mouth became stronger. How could Ciel not know that? As a rabbit, Ciel did not know how many times he had experienced this kind of country regardless of you in his previous life. I'm trying to do things in one place. For a while, Ciel's eyes were slightly red, and when he heard Grindelwald's words, Ciel really felt a sense of homesickness at this moment. But Grindelwald obviously didn't notice that Shire, and then recalled, "This disaster made me have a huge interest in the Red Country. Although I was lonely when I went, I still stayed there and started a step by step to verify that Dumbledore's plan is feasible." After all, when the Big Red Country was just established, there was indeed a shadow of Dumbledore's plan. Although many people noticed me during this period, and even a little friction occurred, it was undeniable. Where did it happen? All of this proves one thing: Dumbledore was right. When Ciel heard this, he didn't interrupt Grindelwald. Instead, he picked up his homesickness and began to think seriously about what his master was going to do. Seeing Ciel holding his chin in thought, Grindelwald shook his head and smiled. He didn't continue talking, but let Ciel think for himself. After all, teenagers need training to grow. Grindelwald, who didn't interrupt Ciel's thinking, began to enjoy his pork knuckle leisurely, but the more he thought about it, the more wrong he was, thinking of everything in the current magic world, plus what Grindelwald said, something like a hairy bear. The more Ciel thought about it, the more cold he sweated. Combined with his bragging when he met Dumbledore and Grindelwald, Ciel felt a bit Spartan for a moment. Didn't these two old scumbags want to make YY a reality? Seeing Ciel's doubtful eyes, Grindelwald, who had just eaten a few bites, was amused and surprised for a while. How long has it been since then? Ciel has already figured it out. Seeing Ciel's cold sweat, Grindelwald shook his head and continued, "Don't think too much, Dumbledore is not a Dark Lord." Ciel felt a little relaxed when he heard Grindelwald's words, but Grindelwald's words immediately made Ciel nervous. Although doing the same thing as the Dark Lord. At this time, Ciel felt that his brain had shut down. After so long, what was Grindelwald talking about? Seeing Ciel's face being played badly, Grindelwald finally decided to stop teasing Ciel, so he continued, "Okay, I'll stop teasing you. Remember when you first met Dumbledore and said words? History can be a good witness to the character of a race." Dumbledore remembered that sentence in his heart, so for a long time, Dumbledore began to read the various histories of Muggles, and soon Dumbledore found a clue. Shire, you must know that the state of the British Magic Circle at this time actually reflects a large part of what the entire international magic circle looks like. You may not know that the entire magic circle is slowly weakening. Do you know why? Seal was frightened by Grindelwald's words, and shook his head with some doubts. To be honest, Seal's eyes have been on Hogwarts for the past 2 years. As for magic, Seal can only say that he has a general understanding. Grindelwald did not ink, and continued, knowledge and wealth, Shire, very simple knowledge and wealth. The magic world is like before the first industrial revolution of Muggles, a lot of wealth and knowledge are accumulated in the hands of the nobles, the people at the bottom are living in dire straits. The so-called nobles are actually pure bloods today. Coincidentally, they also call themselves nobles. These nobles hold a lot of wealth and knowledge in the wizarding world. Muggle graduate students either work for those pure bloods, or they are back in Muggle society. The worst-case scenario is to become a dark wizard. Before you appeared, in fact, Dumbledore has been doing one thing, and that is to expand the proportion of Muggle and half-bloods. Having said this, Grindelwald gave a disdainful smile. You may not know, Shire, when the old bee was a student, Slytherin House at Hogwarts was the king of the school, and the other 3 houses were the king of the school. Basically, they have to obey the existence of Slytherin Academy. Dumbledore himself told me that the biggest achievement in his life was to pull Slytherin House from the altar, ha 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 ha. After Grindelwald finished speaking, he laughed to himself regardless of Seal's expression, and Seal didn't speak a single word. The old man Grindelwald didn't know why he was talking and doing things in a mess today. I talked about my travels for a while, and now I talk about Dumbledore's plans without any scruples. From time to time, I recall the past and scare myself. Seal was a little worried, but he didn't reveal it, just sat there quietly and listened. Grindelwald laughed for a while, as if he had had enough, and then continued, Dumbledore found a solution after looking at the history of Muggles. It's very simple, just defeat the nobles and keep his name. Knowledge liberation. Shire, you have to know that in the Muggle world, a little bit completely liberates the ideological cage and knowledge cage of the people at the bottom, how much potential they will explode. Look at the Muggle world today. For decades, now I am like a fool in the Muggle world. Grindelwald began to laugh at himself constantly, and the abnormal behavior made Seal feel even more worried, as if something was about to happen. Chapter 167 _ The Secrets of the Older Generation. Teacher, what's the matter with you? In the end, Seal asked his own question with some worry. Grindelwald's usual style is elegant, serious, and extremely purposeful. It's clear that the chaotic look isn't quite right now. Grindelwald was stunned when he saw Seal's worried look, picked up the beer on the table, and took a sip before continuing, I'm sorry, Seal, I'll go on. When Grindelwald finished saying this, he seemed to be 10 years older. He started to pick up a knife and fork, and after a slight sigh, he said to Charles while eating his favorite pork knuckle. Charles, I'm sorry, Dumbledore's plan will wait for him to tell you when it's time. Get down to business, and I'll go on. Not long ago, I came back from the bear, and I sent a letter to Dumbledore, knowing your whereabouts. I can't wait to come here. I originally thought of giving you a surprise when you travel. But unfortunately, I use the identity of a Muggle. When I got off the Muggle plane, I was inexplicably involved in the Muggle parade. I had no choice but to quietly run to a very imposing-looking man. Muggle Hotel, want to change identity. Coincidentally, the Muggle I fancy has something to do with you. Seal was still a little surprised when he heard Grindelwald's words. He adjusted his posture and released the slightly numbed shoulders that Hermione was cradling on, waiting for Grindelwald to continue. Grindelwald also gave Seal face, and continued, that Muggle's identity is the second in command of a gangster, and he's still chasing down your murderer. The most important thing is that this Muggle is still alive. Knowing magic. Immediately I got interested, and I decided to play the Muggle well. After all, these things are fun. While I played a good role in that organization, I started to investigate secretly, and soon I discovered something. You should also know Seal, Chaos Kingdom. When Seal heard this word, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. If Hermione hadn't fallen asleep leaning on his shoulder at this time, Seal would have almost jumped up. Grindelwald ignored the excited Seal, and continued to say a little desolately, Seal, do you know? I became interested in this organization almost immediately, and I began to use the identity of a Muggle to keep approaching this organization. Maybe my Muggle status also played a role. These goblins didn't pay much attention to me. After all, to them, I was a powerless Muggle. Of course, this is also convenient for me. They can talk about everything about magic in front of me. After all, I am a Muggle and can't understand that. But gradually I realized something was wrong. Charles, do you know how shocked I was when I found out that the boy named Voldemort was supported by them? At that moment, I realized that I had caught a big fish unintentionally. I packed up my mood and lurked more cautiously. Slowly, Shire, I discovered more secrets, one of which nearly broke me. These goblins have controlled how many pure-blooded families through a series of financial means. These things were completed a long time ago. Above the pure blood, there are these goblins. But they are not satisfied. They are greedy and want more, so they start to seek clear rights. Unfortunately, they failed. You should know which battle in the history book. Later, the goblins realized that as long as the wizards still possessed absolute power, they would never be able to stand on the bright side, so they began to collect knowledge, so that most of the knowledge gathered in the pure blood family under their hands, invisibly weakened the power of the wizards. But the wizarding world does not only have power, and the population is several times theirs, so it is very simple. The best way to eliminate the population is war. Voldemort, me, they chose it. Seal, do you know how angry I was when I heard the news? Grindelwald held his knife and fork with his head down, and continued viciously. It really took a lot of effort for me to stop myself from pulling out my wand and killing these goddamn goblins, and I look forward to learning more. I tried to suppress myself, and finally, I learned more exciting news from the mouth of a gossip who was chatting. Shire, you should know the story of me and Dumbledore in Godric's Gulch, right? At that time, we all felt that we had met each other, and Dumbledore even invited me to her school, Hogwarts, as a guest, and we both solved the puzzle left by Gryffindor. But all this goodness disappeared with which duel? Seal couldn't help but sighed slightly. Teacher, I know these stories, it's not your fault and the master. Whether you are a master, you have to look forward. The past is over, isn't it, teacher? Seeing Grindelwald's appearance, Seal couldn't help comforting him. That incident almost became a hurdle that the two Dumbledore and Grindelwald never passed in their entire lives. Hearing Seal's comfort, Grindelwald couldn't help but smirked, slowly raised his head, his eyes were filled with boundless killing intent, and then said to Seal, then if I tell you, whether it's Dumbledore what happened to our sister, or was it all planned by the goblins to kill Dumbledore's sister by mistake in a duel? After Grindelwald finished speaking, the surrounding temperature rose suddenly, the killing intent in his eyes could no longer be hidden, and even the knife and fork he was holding in his hand began to slowly turn red under Grindelwald's anger. Seal was taken aback. This news was really too exciting. Seal was stunned for a long time and didn't respond, but seeing Grindelwald's appearance, Seal still reacted immediately. Calm down, teacher. This is Muggle territory. Calm down. Hearing Seal's voice, Grindelwald also reacted, and slowly began to put away his killing intent. Finally, after Grindelwald took a few deep breaths, Grindelwald slowly returned to his original appearance. But it is no longer the spirit that Seal had when he first met him. After all, whoever knew that his life was actually a planned tragedy would not be able to help but feel sad all of a sudden. After a long time, Charles seemed to remember something. Teacher, does Master know about this? Grindelwald glanced at Seal, shook his head and said, I didn't tell him. I was afraid he would do something bad. This magic world still needs him. Chapter 168-3rd Generation Dark Lord. Seal looked at the old man on the opposite side with some worry. Although he was worried, Seal also admitted that what Grindelwald said had some truth. The death of Dumbledore's sister was the direct cause of the split between the two friends. This is also the main culprit that caused Dumbledore to live in guilt for nearly 100 years. It is really difficult for Seal to imagine how terrifying thoughts will erupt if Dumbledore really knows the news. In case it was really found out, Dumbledore took the Elder Wand and slaughtered the entire Gringotts. In Shire's opinion, it was considered a conscience of Old Dang. Thinking of this, Seal looked solemnly at the already drunk Grindelwald. He seemed to be considering whether to find a place to make an unbreakable oath or something. After all, Seal didn't want his master to live in his old age in places like Azkaban. Wait, if Dumbledore really turns black, there are really few people who can stop him. Seal couldn't help shivering, and the look in Grindelwald's eyes became more and more dangerous. This is a big thunder. It must be ruled out anyway. Although Grindelwald was a little drunk, he looked at Seal looking at him more and more dangerously, and soon understood what Seal was worried about. He waved his hand indifferently and said, "Don't worry, Seal, I will one who keeps this secret. To be honest, I really don't plan to say anything about it except you, and no one can say it." After saying these words, Grindelwald seemed a little more lonely, and even Charles, who was sitting opposite, couldn't help but feel a little sympathy in his heart. Now Grindelwald is really alone, and the only thing that can be said to be revealed. Seal was barely half of the people who were in his heart, and the other half was probably an old bee far away in England. Grindelwald was only silent for a while before returning to his previous appearance. From a distance, he thought he was an irresponsible old man drinking with a child. Grindelwald continued, "Don't worry about my enlightenment, Shire. Anyway, I know that old bee better than you, and I know what will happen if he knows about this, so I will definitely keep it a secret. If you don't believe me, you can find a place where no one else is. You can be a witness, and I can make an unbreakable oath myself." Seal certainly knew what this unbreakable oath was. In ancient times, it was a magic that slave owners had to master. It could even be said that this oath was the hallmark of witnesses. But without exception, this magic is also very advanced. If the two parties do not have deep magic reserves, this oath will be difficult to form, and it will be gradually replaced by the current unbreakable curse. Because of Slytherin's magical memory, Seal just knew this magical knowledge, so, strictly speaking, Seal and Grindelwald can really fulfill this oath. But Seal still shook his head and rejected Grindelwald's proposal. "Teacher, it's good that you know, there are only a few people I care about, no matter who they are. I don't want them to be hurt. You know what the consequences of this news will be." Quote. Grindelwald pouted and smiled helplessly. "Don't worry, Seal, I know, those greedy goblins would never take the initiative to spread this news, if they don't want to be ranked number one by a newly rising Dark Lord." The words of the enemy. After speaking, he laughed at himself, and then took a sip of beer. Suddenly, Grindelwald looked at Seal with some amusing as if he had remembered something. "By the way, I also learned a very interesting news. Do you want to know about it?" After he finished speaking, he looked at Seal, who was bewildered, with a mocking expression on his face. Seal looked at Grindelwald's stern expression, and temporarily let go of the shock of the news just now, and looked at Grindelwald curiously. "What news? Come and listen," Charles couldn't help asking. Grindelwald looked at Shire's curious baby, and suddenly felt a lot better. Sure enough, it was an inevitable human nature to tease children when he got older, even wizards were no exception. Seeing that Seal's expression gradually changed from a curious baby's expression to, "You should say it quickly, it's out of context, but you want to have a baby without an ass," Grindelwald also decided not to tease Seal. "Okay, don't look at me with a deep resentment. I'll just say it. In fact, they have already selected the candidate for the third generation of the Dark Lord. You can never imagine who it is." After he finished speaking, he looked at Seal with a smug look on his face. After passing the person he knew for a long time, Seal said uncertainly, "Could it be me?" Hearing Seal's words, Grindelwald finally couldn't help laughing. "Ha ha ha, as expected of you, Seal, but you are only half right. Because you are a backup candidate. I was surprised for a long time when the first person was chosen. You would never guess that the first person was Harry Potter. No one is more suitable than Harry Potter. The boy who killed the dragon finally became the dragon. It can also be a good fight against the populist faction headed by Dumbledore. After speaking, he looked at Seal with a look of anticipation, as if he was waiting for something. Seal ignored Grindelwald, who had a bad taste on the opposite side. He lowered his head and thought. Indeed, there is no more suitable candidate than Harry Potter. No matter in terms of life experience or identity, the story of the Savior becoming the great devil will always be the same. It's a blast. But Charles thought of the reckless appearance of Harry Potter. Even if he took care of Harry for a whole year according to Dumbledore's request, Harry didn't learn to think. Thinking of this, Seal looked at Hermione, who was sleeping on his shoulder, with a distressed look. This girl usually has a hard time. Seeing that Seal didn't seem to have a big reaction, Grindelwald sighed in disappointment, and then continued, at the beginning they nurtured Voldemort, but until later Voldemort didn't seem satisfied to be controlled by them. Began to gradually resist them. The most typical representative is Voldemort's Horcrux. As Voldemort's life-saving hand, even they don't know how many Voldemort has done. Even in the later period, Voldemort has begun to blatantly shouted to them the slogan of waiting for death if you do not surrender. Originally, if things continued like this, the Kingdom of Chaos would suffer a relatively big crisis even if it didn't dissolve, but for them, it was fortunate for them to turn a corner. Chapter 169-The Dark Lord 2. At that time, Voldemort didn't know whether it was because of the Horcrux or because he had been immersed in black magic for too long. His character had become extremely crazy, and he was deeply indulged in such ethereal things as prophecy and immortality. You also know the result later. A brand new savior appeared, and everyone in the chaotic kingdom was relieved. After all, if Harry really didn't stop Voldemort, they would be the next to suffer. But then, they became interested in how a baby defeated a mighty necromancer. Speaking of which, Seal, you have to admire their intelligence network. After saying this, Grindelwald ignored Seal, picked up the mug of beer on the table and drank it all in one breath, then took the mug to refill the long mug, and then returned to his seat to continue talking. It wasn't long before they knew this spell, the sacrifice spell. A person voluntarily gave up everything he had, including his soul, life, dignity, everything, just to give his loved one the best he could to protect him from being attacked by the enemy. Harm. Although the greedy goblins did not understand the power of this great spell, they succeeded in discovering an unavoidable problem with the spell. The effect of the sacrifice charm will gradually weaken over time, especially for a child. The only way to ensure that the sacrifice charm will always remain strong is to keep the child by the blood relatives. This is the only weakness. After going through various difficult investigations, the goblins quickly locked onto Harry's mother Lily, because according to the results of their investigation, Lily's family was a Muggle family, and her sister was a Muggle. In other words, Harry will definitely be sent to his aunt's house, because that's the only blood relative of Harry's parents. After locking the personnel, the goblins quickly locked Harry's address. All of this was done with the power of Muggles, but soon they found a thing that made them frustrated. That is because of the secrecy laws and their own organization. As members of the Magic Circle, they cannot appear around Harry Potter openly, and because of the sacrifice curse, even if they know Harry's exact address, couldn't find where Harry lived. Grindelwald said that he seemed a little thirsty. He raised his beer and took a sip, and Seal also came back to his senses and said, "It's similar to the effect of the faithful charm." Grindelwald put down his glass, nodded, and continued, "Similar, but not the same. The principle of the sacrifice spell is to perceive malice, and anyone with malice can't find the Protector's blood relatives or the Protector himself, which is why they're going to use Muggle means to investigate Harry Potter." To be honest, although they knew everything about Harry, but because of various relationships, they could not slowly influence Harry like Voldemort, so they found another way, the Muggle way. Because according to their investigation, Harry's aunt's family seems to be particularly resistant to the existence of magic, and Harry's uncle also runs a Muggle business company. Then the rest is very simple. As long as it is controlled properly, it can ensure that Harry's uncle will not be in a good mood when he comes home every night. In this case, a family that rejects magic, a helpless little wizard, plus uncle's frequent bad mood, this is simply another version of Voldemort. But they guessed one thing was wrong, that is Harry's kindness. No matter how they manipulated, no matter how Harry was abused, the little guy's heart was looking forward to the existence of light. It is precisely because of this that they had to give up their original plan and plan to wait for Harry to influence him when he went to school, but what they didn't expect was that when Harry went to school, because of Dumbledore's protection, they not only there is no chance to influence, and even everything that has been done before is almost exposed in front of the old bee. It was at that time that your Master Dumbledore gradually realized that there was a big hand behind him controlling everything, but at that time you should still be crying under the threat of Voldemort, so he didn't say anything about it. Hearing this, Shatter couldn't help blushing a little, and he was madly complaining in his heart, "Don't go over the old accounts, okay? It's all black history." Grindelwald looked at the embarrassed Seal, shook his head and said nothing more, then said, "You know, just when they were sad, another person appeared, it's you, Seal. Dumbledore's direct disciple, destined to inherit all of Dumbledore's children in the future, excellent talents, ignorant children from the Muggle world. As long as you give a little guidance, then it is almost certain that you will definitely surpass the top 2. Generation Dark Lord. As long as you are under control, then when you successfully ascend to the throne of the Dark Lord, with your talent and Dumbledore's legacy, even if you are a pig, it will be a matter of time to rule the wizarding world. At that time, they can also ascend to the sky in one step as the hero of the dragon. When you die, they will take over the whole world. Charles Lancaster, the 3rd generation Dark Lord, and Voldemort's heir." After he finished speaking, Grindelwald looked at Ciel's face so stubbornly, as if he was afraid of something, and seemed to be expecting something. Ciel was stunned after hearing Grindelwald's ridicule, then shook his head with a wry smile, and then replied, "Me. I just don't want to do something as troublesome as ruling the world, which is technically called thankless." After finishing speaking, he carefully glanced at the opposite Grindelwald, as if he had remembered something, and then Ciel added, "What, teacher, it's not that you are stupid, you believe me, it's just the one who doesn't have a nose." "Yes, teacher, your philosophy still has merit, at least the phrase, 'for the great benefit,' is much more handsome than the noseless, 'pure blood first.'" Hearing Ciel's words, Grindelwald snorted angrily. If this was in Ermengarde, Ciel would inevitably be punched by Grindelwald, so that Ciel could better understand why the flowers were so red. Grindelwald looked around at the Muggles drinking and eating, remembering that he was still in a Muggle restaurant, and gnashing his teeth. HMPH, brat, remember the International Wizarding Secrecy Act. You once. Chapter 170 _ Drunken Grindelwald. Seeing Grindelwald's somewhat arrogant behavior, Ciel couldn't help but feel a little amused. Looking at Grindelwald who ignored him and started drinking and eating meat, Ciel was a little curious for a while. "Teacher, what are you going to do next? Continue the investigation, or go back to Ermengarde?" Ciel was a little curious about his teacher's next whereabouts. Grindelwald obviously did not expect Charles to ask such a question. He was stunned for a moment, then he should eat and drink, and he did not forget to ask the waiter for a bottle of whiskey. "I have no idea, I haven't made up my mind yet. Ciel, I have to avenge this revenge, whether it's the parting ways with Dumbledore or the duel that year. I can't tolerate my ideal being used as a test by others' behavior. But I haven't figured out what to do next. I think I should get in touch with the old bee and exchange information. After all, I really can't handle the gang of fairies splicing together." After he finished speaking, he ignored Ciel, as if to vent his anguish of knowing the truth. Grindelwald raised the bottle a bit viciously and drank, completely giving up the elegant and noble feeling he had in the past, and now it looks like a down-and-out aristocratic old alcoholic. Ciel sighed helplessly. For a while, he didn't know how to persuade this old man who had worked hard for his ideals all his life. The helpless Seal could only take care of Hermione, who was asleep, while Weasley persuaded Green. Dever drink less. But can Grindelwald, who is so depressed, listen to Seal's advice at this time? That is completely impossible. If you have to say it, Grindelwald's current state is comparable to that of Uncle Lou. Then play and dance. With half a bottle of whiskey in his stomach and the sentence, "Leave me alone," Seal knew what was going to happen. Seal was really afraid. At this time, Grindelwald took out his wand and fired a gas stove here. But what Charles never expected was that Grindelwald actually stood up and sang a song immediately after drinking. Some German country ditty, battle song, English love song. This drunk old man actually pinched it at his fingertips. Is it even mixed with 2 Russian songs, plus the cry of Ola? The diners and drinkers around didn't dislike the drunk old man. Maybe because of the carnival, some people even sang along with Grindelwald's singing. The scene was extremely lively for a while, only Seal was more speechless, and the people sitting on the side watching the joy were thinking about how to clean up this farce later. But there is one thing to say, Grindelwald himself has a face that is 7 or 8 similar to Johnny Depp. Even if he is old now, he can be called a good old handsome guy, but this old handsome guy sings well. Seal expresses his admiration for a group of them. After all, in his 2 lifetimes, the singing will not go on the tune for too long. What's more, after a while, Grindelwald had already received the addresses and contact information of an unknown number of women and men, and the drunk Grindelwald did not refuse, and took them all in his pockets. This made a group of Shire Acid say that they should deal with this farce immediately. After all, this place is strictly speaking not far from the French Magic Street. If there is any wizard who likes history to improve life, the scene is estimated to be magical. Animal 2 ending remake. Thinking of this, Seal immediately put Hermione on the bench lightly, and then trotted forward to pull Grindelwald, who was still singing, back to his seat, not forgetting to follow the passing diners and wine guest apologize. Of course, although Grindelwald successfully pulled back his seat, on the way back, he couldn't stand the constant toasting of the already high drinkers, and Grindelwald had only 1 empty bottle of whiskey left in his hand at this time. Seal struggled to drag the drunken Grindelwald back to the bench. The moment Grindelwald fell to the chair, Seal heard the old man muttering, "It's good to have the resurrection stone." This made Seal wonder for a while whether the old man was really drunk, but looking at Grindelwald, who was still snoring and smelled of alcohol, Seal finally determined that this guy was really drunk. Looking at the 2 people lying on the chairs, Seal had a headache for a while, but in the end, Seal had no choice but to take out his small vault and go to the restaurant owner to settle the bill. This is also thanks to Seal and his father, and the men's alliance that Mr. Granger formed at the beginning. Through some manipulations, Seal has a little vault. Otherwise, this drink will be crazy, and Seal doesn't know how to end it. Fortunately, the owner of the visit is a grand uncle. He is very considerate of Seal's behavior of taking care of his girlfriend and the elderly. He also likes the hot atmosphere in Grindelwald just now. The phone at the bar asked Seal to contact his family to pick them up. In the midst of Sha'ur's gratitude, the owner of the restaurant waved his hand to indicate to Sha'ur to contact him quickly. Sha'ur then dialed the number in the RV. Fortunately, the 4 adults were also walking back in the RV at this time. After hearing what happened to Seal, he rushed over immediately and carried the sleeping Hermione and the drunken Grindelwald into the RV. So many people really don't have to live. Of course, because Seal had settled the account ahead of time and found out that something was wrong, Mrs. William could only helplessly explain some of the operations of the men's alliance and confessed to his 2 fathers. In the end, under the expression of Seal's dead friend, and the strange atmosphere in which the 2 fathers looked at Seal with the eyes of the traitor, this trip to France, which was summed up as a mess by Seal, was also the curtain came to an end, and everyone decided to drive back to the UK early tomorrow morning. As for the drunk Grindelwald, Charles made the decision for him and went back together. Anyway, he lived in a small box, and as a wizard, he did not follow the customs rules of the Muggle world, not to mention the EU itself. No customs. Of course, the consequence of this was that Grindelwald rubbed his hangover head early the next morning, looked at the large number of contact addresses he took out of his pocket, and in Ciel's strange eyes, the meticulous actor's name was John Depp's wizard, and laughing with Shire and Hermione's family. Only Hermione, after waking up refreshed the next morning, began to wonder how she had suddenly fallen asleep last night, although of course Hermione still wondered about Shire's teacher named Johnny Depp. But seeing that he had taught himself a lot of little tricks and little magic while still in France while his temporary spellcasting power had not expired, Hermione also decided to be too lazy to pursue it. All in all happy, isn't it? Chapter 171 upcoming third semester. After Grindelwald returned to London with the two families, after declining the Shire family's request to have dinner together, he left gracefully with the worried eyes on Shire's face. Before leaving, he still didn't forget to give Ciel a brain break, mocking a sealed rookie in Ciel for worrying about an elemental mage. Ciel replied cursingly and unceremoniously, but his heart skipped a beat. Child, get to the meaning of Grindelwald. Don't you just tell me not to worry, take care of yourself first when you have time, stinky old man, he is still arrogant at such an old age, no wonder he has to be able to get along well with old Dengtu for 100 years. Until Grindelwald left so far, Shawin made sure that Grindelwald couldn't hear him, he muttered softly. Of course, everyone who was immersed in parting didn't notice Ciel's little complaints, and even if they did, they probably wouldn't care, except for Hermione. If it wasn't too far away, Hermione didn't hear what Ciel was muttering, or with a word from Ciel, Hermione could deduce who the man who claimed to be Johnny Depp was. Then again, in fact, Hermione had already begun to doubt Grindelwald's identity. She was skilled in magic, and could not even lose to any teacher in the school, but she was not famous in the entire magic circle. Min was pretty sure that the identity of the man named Johnny Depp was definitely not that simple. But Hermione didn't find any flaws along the way, she looked like an old man who regarded himself and Ciel as grandsons or granddaughters. Hermione's suspicion didn't last long. The reason was very simple. After all, that female animal could escape the part of going home and sharing the spoils after the crazy buying and buying. Not to mention women, even Ciel got involved. After all, Ciel was very interested in some of the men's products that his father and Mr. Granger bought. After everyone tried their best to snatch, everyone went home contented, only Mr. William was sent to return the travel car. Ciel returned to his small room with a lot of loot, and after he piled all the trophies on the table at once, he threw himself on the cot. I don't know if it was because the summer vacation was a bit, too exciting, Shire felt extremely at ease at this time. It didn't take long for Ciel to fall asleep. In the next few days, after Shire mailed out the gifts he brought back from France, he felt that he was free. Except for the occasional visit by little Hermione, the rest of the things that interest Shire the most was that he was fine. Just walk down Privet Drive and see if you can come across Sirius. Why didn't Charles go to Harry? Stop joking, okay. Ciel saw at once from a distance. At this time, Harry was honestly playing the role of a little servant at home. Except for occasionally sneaking a few pieces of food for this poor child, Ciel has never been in contact with him. After all, according to what Ciel knows about Harry, it is not a big deal, and this information is reluctantly found from Harry for the first time. After the panic at the time of Charles, he realized it by himself in the frantic wink. As for whether the comprehension is right or not, that is another matter. By the way, the reason why Ciel always comes so diligently when he has nothing to do is that the most important thing is that he wants to see Harry's aunt's balloon. After all, this thing looks amazing in the movie, but I don't know what it looks like in reality. I hope not too ghostly. Of course, Ciel still missed this famous scene in the end. The reason is very simple. Hermione is celebrating her birthday. During the holiday, Ciel used a lot of Crookshanks, private goods, so that things like dried fish have been the bottom is almost there. So hey, Shire, who was taken by his own mother for a whole day, looked at the pile of cat supplies piled in the corner of the box that night, and collapsed on the bed with relief and exhaustion. Lying on the bed, Ciel couldn't help but think of the joke in his previous life. 5 years in the army, shopping with his girlfriend, he was paralyzed from exhaustion. Although he is a mother, Shire has already understood the essence of this sentence at this time. Of course, the little Harry dumpling who is still immersed in various tomes not far away does not know. In fact, since Hermione had Seal by her side, she never cared about whether she would have a gift or a happy birthday on her birthday. After all, there is the living treasure of Seal, and Hermione has received some strange gifts since she knew Seal. Even in normal times, Seal would occasionally send some immortal and eye-catching gifts to Hermione. Hermione had been trained by Seal to be very normal. If you don't believe it, you can look at the wall in Hermione's bedroom. The plaque made of aluminum alloy plate clearly engraved on it, "Happy birthday to Hermione, and may our friendship be as strong as a rock." Seal also used Chinese in a very foreign way, and that was the first time Hermione knew how to write her name in Zhongwei. There is also the colorful little dagger that was still on the desk by Hermione. It was one of the birthday gifts from Seal, and it was engraved with Hermione's name. Finally, Hermione put it on the desk. For sharpening pencils, or opening an envelope or courier or something. I have to say that the little things made by Seal, I dare not say anything else, if they are not sandy or practical enough, Hermione is used to it. Finally, after eating the next morning, Seal felt that he had forgotten something. Then he remembered the forgotten Harry and Sirius. After seeing the weather, Seal decided to talk about it tomorrow, but in the morning, Seal saw Hermione. He hurried over with a letter. In Hermione's chance of, fortunately the Ministry of Magic didn't punish Harry, Seal calmly read the letter, which made Seal know that he had missed this famous scene. I don't know how the Ministry of Magic dealt with Harry's aunt, who had turned into a balloon. When Seal threw the question, Hermione, who was still very excited, experienced a second of doubts about life, and she also fell into a daze. In contemplation. Of course, the letter was not only about Harry's recent encounter, but also the invitation to buy school supplies at the beginning of the school year. The letter already stated that the Ron family would go to the appointment on time, and now it depends on whether Hermione and Shire can go to the appointment. Seal thought about it for a while, and ignored Hermione who was still thinking. After writing a simple reply, he explained that Harry would stay at the Leaky Cauldron in peace, and that he and Hermione would definitely go there on time. I handed it over to my owl to send a reply. Until Seal came back, Hermione was still thinking. The footsteps of Seal coming back woke Hermione up. Seeing Seal coming back, Hermione couldn't help but ask, "Slytherin left it for you. Isn't there any magic in magical memory about how to change people back from balloons?" Seal shrugged and said helplessly, "No, I think they might just need a needle." Chapter 172-Scabbers, Miserable Life Begins. A week later, Seal and Hermione stood at the door of the Leaky Cauldron with his small suitcase and said goodbye to the William and his wife who came to see them off. Seal and Hermione decided to stay at the Leaky Cauldron tonight and follow away tomorrow. The Slys and Harry went to King's Cross together. After all, Seal is also curious about the genuine magic car produced by the Ministry of Magic. In fact, if Hermione hadn't stopped him, Seal might have secretly started to remodel his own car. After all, with this simple level of alchemy, Seal with memory can still play well. Even if Seal can't play well, isn't there Ben Niclomed's alchemy notebook stored in Dumbledore's place? The big deal is to come back and study it. Seal felt that this thing was a pure magic pattern arrangement, similar to programming. It should not use a magic wand, but Hermione found it and rejected it. After completely sending off his parents, Seal took Hermione to the front desk of the Leaky Cauldron to open a suite, where Hermione lived, and Seal was responsible for guarding the door. Hermione didn't say anything. After all, Seal had already told Hermione about this, and it was for Hermione's safety. Although the Leaky Cauldron was at the entrance, who knew who would live here? Everything that he experienced in France is still vivid in his mind. Charles didn't want to cause any irreparable damage. Of course, he definitely didn't want to live in the same room with Hermione, and Charles swore that he would never. Of course, Boss Tom didn't say anything. After all, after Sirius escaped from prison, there was still no news. Boss Tom also arranged the suites of Shire and Hermione next to Harry. Surrounded by people from the Weasley family, this greatly increased CL's sense of security. After thanking old Tom repeatedly, he took Hermione upstairs. After the two of them put their luggage away, and after turning around for a long time without finding either Harry or the Weasleys, Hermione looked a little frustrated, but CL was excited. Ignoring old Tom's reminder about where Harry and Weasley were, he dragged Hermione to the pet shop and wanted to give Hermione a birthday present. Hermione, who was a little frustrated at first, was stunned, and CL wanted to give him a pet instead of a steel plaque. This wave of CL's actions made Hermione's heart feel that CL finally opened a little shell for the first time. Not being polite to CL, he began to choose pets happily. In the end, Hermione chose Crookshanks in the corner. After CL paid, Hermione just wanted to buy some cat supplies and was caught by CL. Stopped. After the two answered the room, Hermione stared blankly as CL kept pulling out a full set of cat supplies from the small box. Hermione wondered for a while whether she wanted Crookshanks or CL. I want to pet a cat. Although the descriptions of Crookshanks in the original book say that Crookshanks are ugly, in Shire's eyes, Crookshanks is just a long-haired Garfield, not only not ugly, but also very cute. Especially when Hermione was holding Crookshanks, the big hairball was holding a small hairball, even the same color. At this moment, Charles felt his heart melted. In the end, at Hermione's insistence, CL didn't say anything about the stubborn Hermione, and symbolically took 3 silver coins from Hermione to pay for the full set of cat supplies for CL. According to Hermione's words, this is the way to raise Crookshanks together, otherwise, Hermione doubts whether she wants it or CL wants it. The arrival of Crookshanks, both Shire and Hermione are very happy. The only one who is not happy may be Ron, who came back with Harry at noon. After Crookshanks saw the mouse in Ron's arms, he rushed up with a meow, and the mouse Scabbers was startled, and immediately rushed out into Ron's arms and started to escape. Ron even screamed and was about to go up to stop Crookshanks, but was stopped by CL. Seeing CL holding him back, Ron went crazy and shouted at CL, "Charles, let me go. That damn cat will eat Scabbers." Seeing Ron's excited look, Charles calmly pushed Ron back into his chair. "Calm down, Ron. Let me tell you, you're just too used to Scabbers. Life lies in movement. Scabbers has lived for so long. And many sports can live longer. Believe me, Crookshanks will never eat Scabbers." Quote. After finishing speaking, CL did not forget to say loudly to Crookshanks, "Take it easy, don't play dead. Just exercise, Crookshanks." Crookshanks also responded to CL with a meow while running to save face, which seemed very human. After hearing Crookshanks' meow reply, the smile on CL's face grew even stronger. Looking at Ron, who was pressed into the chair with a worried expression, he couldn't help but leaned into Ron's ear and whispered. Said, "Don't worry about Ron, I have a pet potion, which will only be absorbed better after vigorous exercise. And I promise, we will buy materials in the afternoon, and I will train Banbon before night. You only need to give Banbon a drop every night before going to bed, and I guarantee that Banbon will be alive the next day. Besides, Banbon is so fat that she has never even been in estrus. I think I should lose weight and find a partner for Banbon." With Crookshanks urging, Banbon will definitely succeed. Thanks to CL's usual prestige in the small team, as well as the aura bonus of Dumbledore's apprentice, Ron believed what CL said almost at once. He couldn't help looking at Charles in surprise and asked, "Really?" Seeing that Ron was put on the condom, Charles smiled and nodded, and answered Ron very seriously, "Trust me. Really. Also, about the issue of Scabbers' offspring, leave it to me and I will handle it. Trust me, I bet you can find quite a few female mice, one a day, and there will always be Banbon likes it." Quote. Hearing CL's promise, Ron felt relieved at once, and couldn't help holding CL's hand gratefully, thanking him repeatedly, never stopping Crookshanks from chasing Banbon, and even kept cheering for Banbon. "Lose to that fat cat." When the Weasley family came back and saw this scene, they were a little confused for a while. After understanding the whole story, the family even began to cheer for Banban. While cheering and eating, the only thing that wanted to cry was that they kept running around on the field, watching the Weasley family cheering for themselves while eating, or Peter Pettigrew. As for Charles, on the surface, Shatter was eating his lunch lightly, but his heart was already smiling. Shatter hated people who betrayed the most in his life. Although Loudeng would not let himself get involved in matters concerning Pettigrew, this did not prevent him from stumbled in secret. The child is disgusting about the other party, isn't it? Chapter 173_Purchasing and Potions in Diagon Alley. In the afternoon, a large group of people decided to go out together to buy the necessities for the next semester. Led by Mrs. Weasley, a group of people set off in a mighty manner. Of course, Seal didn't think much about going to Gringotts to exchange money after learning about Chaos Nation. After all, he still had some pensions he got from his teacher last semester, and Harry, a big dog around him. Under the flickering mouth of Shire's writing education, Harry was very happy to exchange gold galleons for Shire and Hermione according to the exchange rate, and he also gained a large amount of pounds, and he dared not say anything else. At least in the next summer, Harry's life can be a little better. After being woken up by Seal, Harry couldn't help but offer to exchange gold galleons for Seal and Hermione every year. Under Ron's strong request, the whole family finally obeyed Ron's wishes and went to the material store to buy some potions to be used in the potions class next semester. The wealthy Seal was not polite, and bought a lot of herbs as promised. After learning about the noon thing, Hermione was very interested in the potion that Seal wanted to make, and wanted to make it together in the afternoon, but Seal refused. You must know that Seal just happened to discover a pure herbal formula in Slytherin's memory that was composed entirely of herbs and had functions of nourishment, estrus and energy. This recipe is still being used by farms and research institutes that carry out some magical animal breeding, and it can be very effective for breeding and breeding of new varieties. If the potions master Snape were here, he would have dismantled Seal at once, but it was a pity that he was not there, so Seal's plan was implemented very smoothly. It is also thanks to the fact that this potion is made of pure herbs, otherwise, Seal himself would not really dare to configure it. Hermione, who was rejected, was a little gloomy. She didn't understand why Seal refused. Could it be an exclusive formula? Hermione, who was holding the tired and breathless Crookshanks, thought a little depressed, but Seal was worried that Hermione would find out the truth after knowing the formula of the herb, and it would be really embarrassing to take him. Of course, only Hermione was unhappy. Harry and Ron had constipated expressions when they heard that Hermione wanted to prepare potions with Seal in the afternoon, because in their plan, they still wanted to go to the afternoon, copying Hermione's homework. But after hearing Seal's refusal, the faces of the two of them immediately turned cloudy and clear. Before even waiting for Seal to speak, the two began to comfort Hermione one by one, trying to divert Hermione's attention. Force. All of a sudden, Seal was a little confused, and he couldn't help but mutter in his heart, "When did our brother three cooperate so well?" Of course, Hermione finally let go of this matter in the perfunctory Seal's statement that this is some undisclosed secret of pure blood on the farm. After all, the next stop is her favorite bookstore, and Hermione is also in the business and has no other thoughts to tangle some knot have. Especially under the guidance of Seal, Hermione obviously developed a great interest in second-hand books this time. So the two separated from the others in the second-hand bookstore. After all, Weasley had a lot of things to buy, and Shire and Hermione basically bought almost the same. The two of them didn't care, and began to dig out books in the bookstore. Of course, the final result was ordinary, although it was very cheap, but to be honest, trying to find that kind of scholar's book is tantamount to looking for a needle in a haystack. Or Hermione had found a book of spells full of notes in a corner. Seal took a brief look and found that everything in the book about black magic had been torn off, so he let Hermione buy the book with peace of mind. In the end, the two of them also went to Ollivander's wand point to maintain their wands, especially Charles, who received a warm welcome from Ollivander. If you can't find your own wand, it is estimated that this meeting should have already started. After everything was over, the two returned to the leaky cauldron, just in time for the large group to come back together. Taking advantage of the time, Harry and Ron took Hermione to make up their homework at once, and Seal also held Crew in his arms. Keyshawn entered his room and started refining the potion while stroking the cat. It was not until it was close to dinner that Seal came out of the room with a large flask in his hand, which was filled with orange-yellow liquid. At this time, the Weasley family, Hermione and Harry were preparing for lunch in the hall. Seeing Seal coming out, Hermione happily waved. After Seal was on the table, he threw the potion to Ron and ordered 2 drops a night, and then Seal showed up for today's dinner, Mr. Weasley. While waiting for Old Tom to serve, Hermione began to complain about Harry and Ron's flawed summer homework. Charles listened quietly. In fact, his attention had been on Harry and Mr. Weasley. Finally, Mr. Weasley glanced as if he had made a decision, called Harry to a corner, and the two began to talk beside Sirius wanted notice. When Harry came back, his expression was already angry. Seal looked at Harry and knew that Mr. Weasley should have told Harry what he knew. Thinking of this, Seal couldn't help but let out a sigh, but Seal didn't plan to tell Harry about Sirius directly. What will Dumbledore do this year when he knows everything? And aside from that, Seal wanted to ask Sirius to help him a little favor, which is why at the end of the summer, Seal would go to Privet Drive to look for Sirius. After these things were simply passed in Seal's head, they were left behind by Seal and began to talk to the twins beside him. The twins were also very excited to tell Seal about their summer vacation in Egypt. For a while, Seal and Hermione were amused by this pair of living treasures, which made Guy smile. Even at the end, even Ron was interested in participating from time to time, and only Harry frowned and his eyes were full of anger. Of course, it wasn't just Harry who was in a bad mood, but Peter Pettigrew, who was eating the canned cat given by Shire beside Crookshanks. Although Pettigrew didn't want to eat canned cat food, she couldn't do it if she didn't. After all, she was hungry. When the damn big cat finished eating, she would be forced to run again to lose weight. For a while, Pettigrew Peter began to miss the life of a fat mouse that ate, slept, and ate. Chapter 174 The official start of the plot. The days in Diagon Alley passed quickly, and Seal said that it was not enough. The reason is very simple. In Seal's opinion, this is nothing to discuss the dead mouse, and the interest is coming to Crookshanks or Hermione's days were called holidays. As for summer vacation, Seal really felt that it was extra training at the school, and it wasn't called a vacation. Of course, what disappoints Seal the most is that no matter how he pays attention to everything on the diagonal, he even pays attention to it when he turns to Lane, but he does not find Sirius, which makes Seal feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe it was because Diagon Alley was covered with eyeliner by the Ministry of Magic at this time. Seal couldn't help but be a little suspicious, but strictly speaking, the big black dog of Sirius should not be afraid of the Ministry of Magic. After all, no one knows. Shire couldn't understand this, but he accidentally saw Comrade Fudge, the current Minister of Magic, not much different from the movie. A big belly, a middle-aged and elderly person who didn't look so smart. However, Seal did not make it difficult for the minister. After all, he did not reach out and slap the smiling face. No matter how much Fudge hated Dumbledore, he even thought that Dumbledore was peeping at the position of his minister, but for Seal, the minister still showed a friendly attitude. This made Seal a little confused, and for a while he didn't understand what kind of medicine was sold in the gourd of the minister who didn't seem very smart. Therefore, Seal also gave full play to the characteristics of talking to people and talking to ghosts. He did not discuss anything with Fudge at all, and always looked like a good man. No matter what views Fudge discussed with Seal, Seal was a word, "I think you were right." After a brief conversation about everything, whether it's Hermione or Ron, it's all the same, what the fuck. You still looked at Seal with the expression of this skill, especially Hermione, and even more cautiously came over and whispered to Seal, only to find out today that you actually have political talent. Seal looked at Hermione with some amusing, and reluctantly complained back, "What do you think I said today?" This sentence made the two of them stunned for a long time, reflecting that it took him a long time to react, that Shire was abruptly talking nonsense with Fuji for a long time. The two who wanted to understand looked at Fuji, who was still telling Harry about the start of school tomorrow, and couldn't help showing a sympathetic expression. This was obviously another person who was crippled by Seal. Of course, the two would not remind Fuji, whose name is called abdominal muscles, but has no abdominal muscles at all. Early the next morning, Shire was stupefied and called by Hermione. The reason was very simple. He was going to catch the train. When he got up, Shire could not help but start cursing and complaining about the so-called Hogwarts Express. This made everyone who had breakfast together at the table laugh helplessly. Obviously, this little train was a novelty sitting a few years before the start of school. After a long time, it was inevitable that it would be full of disgust. But what Charles said in his mad rant, "The night bus is estimated to be faster than the damn express train, but it makes everyone silent," the classic wizard problem, as we all know, comfort and speed cannot coexist unless you have Fox. Of course, all these dissatisfactions were dissipated when Charles got on the special foreign affairs vehicle of the Ministry of Magic. One thing is, although this thing looks like a traditional British car from the outside, it is still the kind that can be seen everywhere on the street, and even it looks like that through glass. But the internal capacity of this thing is actually comparable to the RV that Charles lived in when he was in France. Seeing this, Charles couldn't help but go crazy. This stuff isn't scientific at all, but it's magical. Having said that, if you have money in the future and buy him a supercar and convert it into an RV, that guy will definitely be very fragrant. After this idea took root in Seal's heart, it lingered, and even all kinds of magically modified vehicles began to take shape in Seal's head. Considering that there were absolutely no such things in the magic world, Seal suddenly rose up. Do you want to find someone specializing in the idea of modifying vehicles to make money? After Seal shared his thoughts with the friends, everyone was shocked by Seal's brain hole, but then laughed out loud at Mr. Weasley's words. Mr. Weasley's original words were as follows: "First of all, Shire, I have to admire your idea, a great idea, but it is a pity that your idea cannot become a reality. Because the Division for the Prohibition of Muggle Substance Abuse, the director is sitting here." Of course, this is not the point. The point is that no one will buy your stuff, Shire. The poor can't afford it, and purebloods don't like it. When it comes to speed, your modified car isn't as good as a door key, though it's a little uncomfortable. Hearing Mr. Weasley's words, Shire suddenly became stunned and lost the idea of selling. But the idea of having a super sports car has not been extinguished, and he began to discuss with Mr. Weasley and Hermione chattering behind his back. Technical feasibility. After all, in Shire's view, as long as the mind does not slip, it is possible for an F1 to become a touring car, and these bastard wizards will never understand the charm of racing. Of course, there is also Hermione who doesn't understand. Although she doesn't take Seal's obsession, she is very interested in the technical feasibility that Seal said. After all, for Hermione, nothing is more interesting to her than advanced magic. Except for black magic. Everyone was chatting about topics of interest to the people around them along the way, and even Weasley's twins were running around in the car, but this magical little car drove exactly to its destination, and it went all the way. No one found out. At this point, Seal couldn't help but lie in his heart again. Magic is such a thing. Ah, amazing. Of course, this thing is not without its faults. In order not to arouse suspicion, it can only drop a few people every few hundred meters. Harry followed the Weasleys and got off at the place closest to King's Cross Station. Otherwise, a car with 4 people will be held to death, and a dozen or so people will come down, all with huge luggage. Ghosts know that there is definitely something wrong with this thing. It's a pity that Seal and Hermione were the third batch of people to get off the bus. Fortunately, both of their luggage were in Seal's magical little box, and there were no noticeable problems for the two of them who traveled lightly. Seal didn't know why he always felt strange today, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. The two of them walked around until they crossed the platform, and when they saw Harry and Weasley's waiting for everyone, Charles felt strange. He seemed to think that he had forgotten something, but Charles thought about life and death. Not get up. Chapter 175 _ Sealed. This feeling never dissipated when Seal got on the train. Originally, Seal wanted to see if there was anything interesting in the twins' carriage, but he was helplessly pulled by Hermione and followed Harry to a seat in the same carriage. It wasn't until Charles entered the carriage that he found that there was already a man in a shabby patched suit sitting in the corner sleeping. The long coat covered his face, making it impossible to see him in the end for a while. What is it like? Harry didn't know this man, but Charles did think about it, and all of a sudden, Charles felt cold sweat wet his back. Damn it, Lupin. Damn it, I just said I forgot something. Photo ghost. Seal complained frantically about his carelessness in his heart. Maybe the days in Diagon Alley were too peaceful, and Seal's attention was all on Sirius and the mouse. Seal, who had been overwhelmed for a while, actually forgot a big gift that would be given by the plot at the beginning of the 3rd grade. In fact, it's no wonder that Seal is so nervous. Although he knew that nothing would happen, Seal, who had not yet mastered the Guardians of God, was unexpectedly lacking in confidence at this time. Rarely, Charles sat silently on the side. Although Charles was quiet, the rest of the people would not be quiet. After discussing Lupin, who was sleeping by the window for a while, the three of them paid attention. The force soon concentrated on Harry. Except for Seal, the other two, even if they were stupid, knew that this year must be due to Harry's reasons for a special car to take them to school, otherwise they would not be treated like this. Looking at the curious eyes of the two, Harry sighed helplessly, and honestly explained his conversation with Fudge to the two, as well as what Mr. Weasley told him about Sirius being the murderer of his parents. In the end, he explained to the two why they would protect themselves. It was very simple. It was normal for a Death Eater lunatic who could blow up a street to seek revenge from him after he was released from prison. The grudges of the previous generation and Harry's novel-like fate shocked both of them, and for a while they didn't know how to comfort Harry, who looked angry. The two of them didn't notice at all. When Harry told these things, Lupin next to him trembled slightly, and he didn't know whether the kind werewolf was really asleep or pretending to be asleep. In the end, it was Ron who held it back for a long time before he said, "Don't worry too much, Harry. We have Seal, and if that bastard really wants to harm you, it doesn't matter if it's me or Hermione or Charles will protect you. Don't dare to say anything else. It's just Seal. That madman is enough to fight. You forget that last year he was able to get on fire and tied with that old bat." Seal was still in a daze, and he kept thinking about the knowledge points of God's Guard and some good memories in his head. Suddenly, he heard Ron nod himself, but he didn't respond for a while. Looking at him with some doubts, the three of them tilted their heads and asked sole questions. "What did you say?" Looking at Seal's genuinely confused expression, Ron reluctantly repeated what he said just now, and encouraged Harry again, firming up the central idea of the two brothers sharing weal and woe. But the fire was just ignited by Ron before it was ruthlessly extinguished by Seal. "Sorry, Ron, maybe I'm not as fiery as I was last semester because I've been sealed with elemental powers." After he finished speaking, he didn't forget to spread his hands at Ron, indicating that his strength was greatly reduced now. Ron didn't react for a while, and when he heard Seal's words, he continued to strengthen the central idea of brotherhood with Harry. "Look, Harry, I said that Seal will definitely protect." "What?" Ron's howl frightened the three of them, but the random trio reflected it, and Seal was sealed with his elemental abilities. Hermione was even more shocked, staring at Seal with big beautiful eyes. "What's the matter, Seal? What happened?" "I said that I haven't seen you use any magic during such a vacation. I thought my temper has really changed." Seeing the three of them looking at him in shock, Seal scratched his head a little embarrassedly, and said to Hermione a little embarrassedly, "Didn't I tell you?" "No, I remember me. I told you, Hermione." Hearing Seal's sophistry, The three of them looked at each other and exchanged their experiences instantly, especially Hermione, who looked at the two of them very innocently, and the expression was almost written on his face that Seal never told me. So the three of them looked at Seal very seriously, and Hermione even blushed with anger, looking at Seal with serious eyes. I swear, Seal, you didn't tell me. What's going on? Seeing Hermione looking at him angrily, and the two useless Hermiones on the other side looking at him very dangerously, as if as long as Hermione gave an order, the two would go up without hesitation. A wave of strong men came and locked the man, and fixed Seal in various dangerous positions for Hermione to interrogate. Seal, who felt the big danger on the top of his head for a while, was not good at fooling around. He could only honestly explain to everyone that this was a Slytherin test or something. Of course, as for where and how the test was conducted, Charles wisely chose not to say. After all, if Harry knew where he and Snape were watching Harry's live-action show, it is estimated that Harry could draw his wand. Give yourself a haircut. It's not enough to chew on a big melon, but it's absolutely impossible to escape. Hearing the answer that Shah-Urjibin did not reveal anything, the three looked at each other, and all expressed concern for Shah-Ur without exception. Ron even patted his chest to indicate that there was danger and could stand behind him. As a man, Lord Weasley will protect everyone. Seal gave Ron an angry look at Ron, who was pretending to be B, and broke his fantasy angrily. Don't think about it, Ron. Even if I get sealed, it's better than you, Slytherin Seal. He has my elements, but left me with his lifelong magical memory and all his spellcasting experience. Although it is some magic from 1,000 years ago, it is not a problem to hang you. After he finished speaking, he didn't forget to glance at Ron, who was gradually letting out his anger, and then hit him. The teacher also discovered my problem at the beginning, but he thought there was nothing wrong with it, and my main job this semester is to relieve the seal on my body, so don't think too much about Ron, just relax. Hearing Seal's mockery, Ron's face turned a little red for a while, but then he looked at Seal with a sullen face, and said viciously, okay, damn Seal, feel the justice of my Uncle Ron. Go, while your sick is killing you. After he finished speaking, he was about to rush up to fight with Seal. Seal was not afraid. He calmly squeezed his fist, made a crackling sound, and looked at Ron with a sneer. Grandson. For a time, the carriage was full of laughter and laughter. Under the bright lights, even the cloudy sky, except for London, could not suppress the joy in the whole carriage. Of course, what he couldn't suppress was Lupin's youthful look on his face hidden under his coat, and the corners of his mouth that slowly raised. Chapter 176-Dementors. Under the leadership of Ron, both Harry and Seal forgot their troubles for a while, and laughed out loud. After all, Ron dared to say other things, and it is still very good to manage the atmosphere of the team. I don't know when it started, but it started to rain heavily outside the window. With the gloomy weather, it was unspeakably depressed, but all this did not affect the few people in the carriage. Under the bright lights, several people were feeling the long-lost happiness, and they kept on telling their own experiences during the summer vacation. Harry talked about how he blew up his aunt. Ron shared what he had seen and heard in Egypt, occasionally interspersed with a few complaints about the Gemini spoofing him at the Pyramid Force, while Hermione recounted what happened to him in Shire in France. For a time, everyone felt happy for each other's wonderful summer vacation, and even the nature came up. At noon, Charles even packed a box and brought out a sumptuous lunch for everyone to eat together. Originally, Seal planned to ask Lupin to eat together, but he didn't know whether the kind werewolf was pretending or was really sleepy. Seal couldn't wake him up no matter how he called. I had no choice but to leave a lunch for the poor professor, waiting for him to wake up before eating. After that, a few people started to throw their cheeks away and start eating, especially Ron, which almost made people wonder if Mrs. Weasley did not give Ron food during the summer vacation. Having said that, Ron was very excited. Every time he was on vacation, Ron would unconsciously miss the Hogwarts house elf craftsmanship and cooking as an elf when he was hungry. Masters Shire craft. After all, Ron and Mrs. Weasley are native British people, and British food, is good to eat. It may be that Seal still had the habit of being a rabbit in his previous life. Seal felt a little sleepy just after eating. After Hermione changed positions, she leaned on the door panel and wanted to take a nap. Hermione was very clearly aware of this little fetish of Charles. He changed seats with Seal in a hurry, and then continued to drink. Harry and Ron started chattering and talking, and he didn't look sleepy at all. As the train moved forward, the sky was getting darker and darker outside. The rain seemed to sense that the night was coming, and it was raining harder. It was obviously only in the afternoon, close to sunset time, but the sky was covered with thick black clouds. It was as if the night had come early. The three of them, who didn't know what they were saying happily, didn't notice that the train was slowing down at all. Finally, with a violent pause, the train stopped. This time, he also woke up Seal, who had been sleeping for almost an afternoon. The somewhat confused Seal rubbed his stiff neck, looked at the three people who were bewildered and said, "Here we are." After speaking, he was about to stand up to change his clothes, but was pulled by Hermione. "No. Seal, it's not time," and the train stopped for some reason. As soon as Hermione's voice fell, the warm lights in the compartment flickered a few times and then went out, and the whole train was plunged into darkness. Fortunately, a few people were still very rational, and the moment the lights went out, they all took out their wands and flashed a fluorescent light. When the lights went out, the drowsy Charles woke up all of a sudden. "The Dementors are here." Before he could sort out his dazed face, Seal suddenly protected Hermione. His face became extremely serious, and said to several people, "Sit down, I have a bad premonition." Harry and the others knew that such a situation was obviously abnormal. Before Seal could finish speaking, he was already sitting in his seat, constantly vigilant about the surroundings. Of course, if Ron's leg wasn't one of the "if it shakes," the whole picture can be a little more serious. As Shah-Ur's voice fell, as if to save Shah-Ur's face, white frost began to spread on the glass of the carriage, and the speed was very fast. Soon, the glass of the entire car seemed to be winter, making it impossible for people to see it. "What is it like outside?" The temperature in the car also drops rapidly. I have a bad premonition," Ron said tremblingly, holding his wand, and the wand in his hand kept flashing along with Ron's trembling light. On the other hand, Seal ignored Ron's words at all. He kept recalling all the good memories in his mind, and pointed his wand at the door of the carriage. As soon as Ron's voice fell, as if to verify Ron's words, a thin, long black hand slammed on the glass of the carriage. All of a sudden, the temperature in the car dropped sharply, and everyone felt that it was difficult to be happy again, as if they had fallen into an icy hell in an instant. Slowly accompanied by the black giant hand, there is also a tall monster. The whole body is covered with black gauze, which makes it difficult to see the appearance. The tall and thin figure is as if he has never eaten. With the appearance of this monster, the sense of despair in everyone's heart became more intense, and Ron even started to fight with his teeth, but he still said the name of the monster tremblingly, "Dementors. How could they be here?" Quote. The Dementor outside the door seemed to hear Ron calling him, and stood at the door of the carriage at once, and then the Dementor slowly opened the door of the carriage. Seal gritted his teeth, insisted on holding his wand and shouted at the Dementors, "Go away. There's no one you're looking for here." But the Dementor didn't pay any attention to Seal's threat, and still started to play floating in the carriage slowly. This behavior obviously angered Seal, and Seal could even feel Hermione's grip on him behind him. Cold little hands of clothes. Therefore, Seal no longer hesitated, and shouted a spell in a loud voice, "Call Godguard." With the completion of Seal's spell, white mist continued to emerge from the top of Seal's wand, like a small shield, blocking the Dementor's forward-moving footsteps. Seal gritted his teeth and kept insisting, trying his best to recall his various happy memories in his mind, and even began to constantly recall his perfect date with Hermione in France. Along with Seal's memory, the white smoke spewing from the top of the wand began to grow larger and larger, but it did not condense into any Patronus, but the white shield gradually grew larger. The Dementor was suddenly repelled by Ciel's white shield, and suddenly seemed to become strangely angry, and began to make a hoarse roar. The roaring sound was like a rallying order, and all of a sudden, 2 Dementors appeared beside the roaring Dementor as if they were teleporting, and the 3 Dementors began to continuously impact Shire's small shield. Although Ciel tried his best to maintain his happiness, with the increase in the number of Dementors, in the end, Ciel also seemed to be falling into hell. He felt an endless despair and could no longer maintain his own happiness. Magic. With the shattering of Ciel's magic, the despair brought by the 3 Dementors rushed into the carriage, and Ciel felt a burst of despair in his heart at the moment when the magic was shattered. Past. When Ciel lost consciousness, he vaguely heard Hermione desperately shouting his name, and a strange voice shouting the same spell as Ciel, and then that dazzling white light was in Ciel's memory. The last thing to see. Chapter 177 Charles's heart disease. Ciel had a nightmare for a long time. In the dream, Voldemort grinned and looked at Ciel. The Death Eaters under him were frantically torturing Ciel's parents. Even Hermione was caught by that mad woman Bella. Mudblood letters are engraved all over him. Ciel felt like he was going to be blown away, but his body couldn't move even the slightest, and even blinking his eyes was a luxury. Voldemort kept whispering something in Ciel's ear. Hermione's cry for help kept bombarding Ciel's brain, and Hermione's voice kept recalling in his ears, "Charles, help me. Ciel, 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 wake up." Hermione's wake up sentence was like a switch, and it suddenly stimulated Ciel to wake up, and Ciel suddenly collapsed from the state where he had collapsed on the seat. "Hermione!" Ciel shouted, hugging Hermione before Hermione could react. A few minutes ago, when Lupin drove away the Dementors, when the car was warm again, everyone saw Harry and Ciel lying on the ground, and everyone hurriedly carried them to their seats. After lying down, Professor Lupin worried about the other little wizards. After instructing a few words, Lupin carefully opened the door of the carriage and walked out. A few minutes later, the dark and cold carriage returned to its previous warmth and brightness. Harry also accompanied the carriage at this time. Regained consciousness. Only Ciel remained in a coma, and his face was getting paler and paler. Hermione watched anxiously from the side, and could only call out to Ciel. Unexpectedly, the first time Ciel woke up, he jumped up and hugged her, and Hermione's face was so red that blood was dripping. Ciel woke up the moment he hugged Hermione, and then his anger was randomly transformed into a surprise like a dream of escaping from death. Afterwards, accompanied by a huge surprise, came the ignorance, that's right, the ignorant. At this time, Ciel could clearly feel that Hermione's body temperature in his arms was rising in a straight line, and it was accompanied by a movement that did not dare to move. Hard. Just when Ciel didn't know what to do, the door of the carriage was suddenly opened, and Professor Lupin came back. Lupin, who had just opened the door and was still worried about his friend's son, had no idea what was going on when he opened the door. After being stunned for a while, Professor Lupin couldn't help coughing softly. Then, with a look of nostalgic youth on his face, he couldn't help but tease, "Well, do I need to pretend I didn't see it and come in again?" Hermione's already red bloody face became even redder after hearing Professor Lupin's teasing, and she couldn't help but twisted the soft flesh around Ciel's waist fiercely. Ciel was still stunned and didn't know what to do, but after Hermione's skill engraved in the female DNA, all Ciel could do was snort and start begging for mercy. After a while, the boys and girls finally quieted down, and let the tired Professor Lupin enter the carriage and do it. Lupin looked at all this with a smile. To be honest, looking at the appearance of Ciel and the others made Lupin miss the way he looked when he was in school. By the way, he looked at Harry a few more times, and his eyes were really harmonious. Lily was carved out of a mold. After Lupin returned to his seat, he smiled and took out 2 slabs of chocolate from his arms and stuffed them into the hands of Charles and Harry. He smiled and looked at everyone and said, "Hurry up and eat, it will be better after eating. Don't worry, I've ridden to Hogwarts and Dumbledore will know what's going on here." After speaking, he began to supervise the 2 of them to quickly eat the chocolate. After all, the senses of the Dementor are really bad. Harry looked a little lack of energy, as if he had something on his mind. He slowly tore it apart under Lupin's gaze. Unpacked the chocolate. Compared to Harry's slowness, Seal was much more cheerful. I saw Seal swiftly tearing open the chocolate wrapping paper, tearing off half of it and throwing it into his mouth very naturally, and then as if conditioned reflex, the other half was sent directly to Hermione's mouth. Hermione lowered her head and blushed no longer. She kept complaining about Seal's straight male behavior, but she still honestly swallowed the chocolate handed by Seal, of course, biting hard. A mouthful of Seal's hand as revenge. Regarding the small interaction between the two, Seal didn't break it, and naturally he didn't say anything, but Harry, who was opposite, asked Ron with some worry after giving the chocolate powder to Ron in the appearance of the scholar Seal. "Did you hear someone screaming just now?" "It was a woman. I also saw a green light." Hearing Harry's question, Lupin, who was just about to speak to comfort Harry, didn't wait to speak, and Seal said first, "No one screams, Harry. You say that what you see is the source of your fears. Just like me, I saw it too." Halfway through the conversation, Shaw was stunned, not knowing what to say, and there was another nameless fire surging upwards from the bottom of his heart for no reason. Seeing that Seal stopped talking halfway through his words, and his face became more and more gloomy, Harry also knew what Seal was thinking, sighed and did not intend to continue to question Seal. At this time, Professor Lupin, who was on the side, spoke. "Harry, I'm sorry for what happened to you. The woman's scream, you said maybe your mother's scream if I guess correctly. As for the green light." Professor Lupin didn't finish speaking, but Harry also knew what Professor Lupin was going to say, and the random Harry's face became gloomy along with Lupin's words. Ron, who had just finished eating chocolate, simply wiped the sticky chocolate on his mouth with the back of his hand. Looking at Harry and Charles with gloomy faces, after thinking for a while, he said, "Don't be sad, haha. Lee, at least you know your mother's voice, don't you?" Hearing Ron's words, Hermione was stunned for a while. She didn't care to think about Seal's behavior just now. She raised her head and glared at Ron. After that, quickly took over the conversation. "Harry, don't listen to Ron's nonsense. It's not your fault. I mean, it's not your fault at all." Hermione's incoherent words consoled, and she didn't know how to comfort Harry for a while. Seeing how the two of them were embarrassed, Lupin still couldn't help comforting Harry. "Harry, it's not your fault. You have to know that people who have suffered major incidents in the way of bombing are in the face of Dementors. It doesn't feel good when you grow monsters." Hearing Lupin's words, Harry's complexion was a little better, and he slowly began to return to his previous appearance, and he even cared about whether anyone else fainted. When Harry was worth the whole train, only himself and Seal fainted, and immediately looked at Seal with the expression of a close friend, but when he saw that Seal's gloomy expression was about to catch up with Snape's, Harry clearly chose to shut up and change the subject bluntly. Chapter 178-Malfoy's correction, physical. Seal's mood was abnormally bad at this time. It wasn't until after the incident that Seal thought he could handle that happened, that Seal found out that Voldemort had become himself. Heart Shadow. Since when? Seal began to think back step by step of the events he started from time travel. To be honest, at the beginning, Charlie's incomparable self-confidence in the seat of the Transmigrator seemed to be the Black, who Voldemort regarded as a village gangster. Demon King. But I don't know since when, Seal's mentality began to change, compared to when he could hold a joke mentality in the residual blood version of Voldemort 1v1. Today's Seal can be said to have changed back to the timid little fat man he used to do. In terms of fighting, he would rather the dog be in the back and shoot cold, rather than stand up and face people one-on-one. Even if his own strength is far superior to the opponent, counting the battles in the second year, no, in Seal's opinion, it can't be called a battle. Whether it's facing the tragic basilisk, or the one-on-one match between the Ministry and Snape in a duel drama, in Seal's opinion, it's nothing more than a discussion. Even when facing the basilisk, Seal is also a know that you don't have to worry about your life. This state is obviously different from the time when he dared to hold a Gryffindor sword against Voldemort's big melon in the first grade. What was your state of mind at that time? Sha'ur was a little lost for a while, and his indomitable and courageous drive that he used to go forward had disappeared. When did it start? Seal thought of the nightmare just now, and his blood pressure rose again uncontrollably. Suddenly, Seal understood all of this. I have to say that Voldemort is really a good player in manipulating people's hearts. At that time, he knew that he was not Ciel's opponent, so he could plant a seed of fear in Ciel's heart with only words, even silently. The influence of the current Shire. And even if Ciel couldn't help but kill Voldemort's remnant, what did Voldemort pay for? The death of only 1/7 of the souls, but can rely on the undead attributes of eating big melons to harvest a helper or heir that can definitely hit Dumbledore in the future. Ciel, who had understood all this, was in a cold sweat for a while, and he had always looked down on that Voldemort, but at random, Ciel felt as uncomfortable as eating a dead fly. I understand, but the psychological thorns are not as easy to pull out as the thorns in the throat. For a while, Ciel didn't know what to do. He could only have a gloomy face, constantly thinking about how to do it all. Save. It's not too late to make amends, and Ciel still understands this point. He is no longer the ordinary, uncommon little fat man in his previous life. What he needs now is a complete transformation, and he doesn't want to change back to the first grade. At the time, he looked like he dared to fight, but at the very least, in this life, Ciel would never want to be an ordinary person like in his previous life. Until the train arrived at the station and everyone got off the train, Ciel was thinking with a gloomy face. It was raining heavily outside the platform. The clouds in the sky were accompanied by lightning, and the castle not far away seemed to be Muggle. It's like the standard villain in a horror movie takes the castle where the princess is imprisoned. The first-year wizards couldn't help complaining when they knew that they had to go on a boat in such a ghost weather, and Hagrid wasted a lot of energy to keep these little guys quiet. Began to look down and followed Hagrid on the only path to the first grade. Harry and the others stood at the end of the senior year, looking at the dejected little guys. They couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. After all, no one wanted to get wet in the rain in this horrible weather, compared to the first-year little guys. We, the seniors who were able to ride to school in the night carriage, were undoubtedly lucky. A few people stood at the end of the line, because Ciel was not in a good mood, so they took care of Ciel's emotions tacitly, and slowly lined up to board the carriage. But unfortunately, when everyone wants to be silent, someone will jump out and do things, making everyone who is not in a good mood even more depressed. Yes, the person who can do this kind of thing is that one big back. Hey, Scarhead, I heard that you were scared by a Dementor on the train and you not only pissed your pants but fainted. Malfoy was standing at the front of the line, but after spotting a group of depressed people, he actually saw Baba running away come to the back of the line and taunt Harry. Shut up, Malfoy. I don't think you're doing much better. Why, how can someone who hides behind two big stupid guys and keeps calling Daddy come out and mock me? Harry heard Malfoy's voice. Immediately after the ridicule, he pointed back at Maiming. After Malfoy heard Harry's words, like a ferret whose tail had been stomped on, Malfoy sprinted in front of Harry, staring at Harry through Harry's glasses. Potter, what right do you have, you comatose coward, to speak of me like that? Malfoy's voice just fell, and before Harry could refute, a voice inserted into the needle to mammon between Malfoy and Harry. Classmate horse dung, if you want to kiss Potter, please hurry up, or else please get out of the way and don't delay us getting on the carriage. It was Ciel. At this time, Ciel's face was gloomy and terrifying. Usually, when Harry and Malfoy were flirting with each other, Ciel still wanted to stand by and watch the pair fall in love and kill each other. Is really not in the mood to watch the two show their affection. After hearing Ciel's words, the two of them bounced away as if they had been fitted with a spring. Malfoy watched as Ciel's face slowly began to turn from white to red, and then from red to black. Charles fiercely, Charles Lancaster, when can you intervene in the matter between me and Pot? Don't think I don't know, you are a mudblood just like Granger on the other side. And my dad told me, now you have lost your qualifications for elemental magic, right? After he finished speaking, he looked at Ciel triumphantly, as if he knew some great secret. After hearing Malfoy's words, not only Shire's face was gloomy, but even the face of Harry, Ron and Hermione, who was passing through, began to turn bad. Ron even drew his wand and pointed at Malfoy. "Apologies, Malfoy, or I'll definitely let you know what regret is." But after hearing Malfoy's words, Seal was not so angry. Instead, he raised his head with a smile and looked at Malfoy, who was somewhat regretful, and said with a smile, "What did you say just now? I didn't catch it. Say it again." Smile JPG. Chapter 179 _ Correction 2. Malfoy looked at the smiling Seal and felt that a big word, dangerous, suddenly appeared on his head, but thinking of the information his father said about Seal, Malfoy still bit the bullet for the sake of face. Repeated. Even after the repetition was completed, he looked at the two humming generals beside him, and after confirming that Crabbe and Goyle were still standing by his side unswervingly, Malfoy became more courageous, and even dared to start sulking in front of Seal. After Seal got the answer he wanted, he didn't know why, but his mood suddenly improved. He smiled and walked forward step by step, even pressing down the wand that Ron pointed at Malfoy. Seeing Seal walking towards him step by step, Malfoy was a little flustered for a while. After all, according to Seal's force value, even if he lost his element, he could still hit his father without knowing him. "What are you doing, Charles Lancaster? I warn you, my dad is the school manager. It's against school rules to use magic to attack classmates at will." Malfoy ducked behind Crabbe and Goyle, said shiveringly. On the Seal side, he took off his wand and coat and handed it over to Hermione as he approached unhurriedly. He didn't forget to tell Hermione to wait a while and find a way to get some white fresh potion back. Seeing Seal's appearance, Hermione immediately understood what Seal was going to do. While Seal's small suitcase was still on the train, Hermione rolled her eyes helplessly and came directly with Seal's wand. One shot of the flying spell, one time and 2 times, the wand did not reject Hermione, and completed the task obediently. On the other hand, Malfoy was under too much pressure. Seal approached with a smile, and kept squeezing his fingers. "Malfoy, you know, although the school rules clearly state that magic attacks are not allowed classmates, but it didn't say that you can't use physics to attack classmates." After hearing Seal's words, Malfoy was stunned. As a pure blood, he didn't know what physics was, but Harry, who was on the side, reacted at once, and whispered to Ron's side to signal Luo-Un put away her wand. Just when Malfoy was about to ask what physics was, Seal rushed up with a single stride, and along with Seal's straight punch and Malfoy's scream, Seal howled, "This is its Muggle ancestral physics. Feel it with your body, Malfoy." After seeing Seal attacking, Harry and Ron were not polite, and charged at the second general with a strange cry. Looking at the chaotic boys on the field, Hermione couldn't help shaking her head and sighing, but she didn't want to contact the professor. After all, this guy Malfoy scolded himself just now, and even Hermione would quietly be by the side. Use magic to assist your 3 teammates. For a while, with the Thunder and Shire's increasingly uncontrolled trash talk, poor Malfoy was put into various positions by Shire, who had been keeping fit, and was powerless to resist. 5 minutes later, Seal, Harry and Ron clapped their hands and stood up from the ground. Hermione immediately stepped forward to add a healing buff to everyone with the white fresh potion, and also gave the 3 of them a clean-up. As for the 3 Malfoys who fell to the ground and groaned, Hermione, very careful, poured the potion on the wounds that could be seen on the 3 of them. After a while, the 3 people lying on the ground seemed to be fine, at least they looked like this when they didn't take off their clothes. After some venting just now, Ciel's mood has inexplicably improved, and a happy smile hangs on Ciel's face again. In terms of venting, dozens of magic spells together are better than but physics. Ciel couldn't help but sighed silently in his heart. So everyone ignored the 3 Malfoy lying on the ground, and under the protection of a water avoidance spell from Charles, everyone happily boarded one of the last 2 carriages. After that, I happily participated in a sorting ceremony and a dinner party. As for Malfoy, The famous scene of rushing into the sorting ceremony in a disheveled manner, Seal felt that it could be the talk of a lifetime. As for the complaint, that's even more impossible. Poor Malfoy could never have been injured without taking off his clothes under the actions of Seal, and there were no witnesses, even if Malfoy was there. In public, he took off his clothes to prove his innocence. Who can guarantee that it was Shaw who fought? You must know that there is no recovery spell in physics to see if the fist is swung out, not to mention that Master Malfoy is still embarrassed, and if Charles is right, Malfoy can only suffer from a dumb loss. Seeing that Malfoy was reprimanded by Professor McGonagall and returned to the Slytherin table, Charles narrowed his eyes and started to plan the follow-up plot. Malfoy and the two younger brothers had to say story. I don't know what the title is. You must know that according to CL's careful eye, if Malfoy doesn't know what revenge is from morning to night, I'm sorry for the 3 words Malfoy scolded. In this way, it can be said that Seal participated in the most uninteresting sorting ceremony. After all, Seal was constantly braving bad water in his heart, and Seal never paid much attention to the sorting. But the banquet still managed to attract the attention of Seal. After all, the dishes in front of Seal were very different from those of others. If I had to say it, the elves actually opened a small stove for Seal and made a bunch of Chinese food on the table, in front of Charles. As for the presence of other people, it is not without, but it is definitely not as concentrated in front of Seal. For a time, the little wizards in the entire auditorium were attracted by the novel food in front of them. In particular, the senior students, who have been eating recipes that they have been eating for many years, have been updated today. Everyone showed great interest for a while. Under Dumbledore's order, all the little wizards who were starving on the road throwing off his cheeks, he started to eat frantically. Of course, Seal was inside, and I dared not say anything else. At this time, Seal felt that he was in a better mood. Sure enough, delicious food would cure any bad mood, not to mention the Chinese food in his hometown. As for British food, Seal said that you will know what you eat, and do not make comments. Just as Seal was enjoying his meal, a voice sounded in Seal's ear. It was Dumbledore's voice. Charles, wait a moment in my office. Seal looked around secretly and found that no one heard the sound, so he looked at the teacher's chair and saw Dumbledore smiling at him, putting away the elder wand he just cast. Seal nodded slightly at Dumbledore, then raised the chicken drumstick in his hand to salute Dumbledore from a distance, and Dumbledore also raised his wine glass and responded to Seal's drumstick with a smile. Chapter 180-Dumbledore's Talk. After everyone was satiated, Dumbledore stood up and briefly introduced his experience with Lupin, the teacher of defense against the dark arts, and Hagrid, the teacher of the new Fantastic Beasts class, and then directed everyone to come with his wand. The first school song. After that, it was the commonplace to go back to bed and go to bed. As for Seal, of course, it was very skilled to leave everyone, and then went all the way to Dumbledore's office unimpeded. Just as Seal opened the door, he saw Dumbledore sitting behind the table with a serious face. Dumbledore saw Seal entering, smiled slightly, and said to Seal, Charles, I listened to Lupin talked about what happened on the train. Seal didn't use Dumbledore's arrangement, and sat down on the chair opposite Dumbledore without hesitation. Hearing Dumbledore's question, Seal frowned slightly, and without hesitation put his own. All guesses were explained to Dumbledore. Hearing Seal's analysis, Dumbledore sighed slightly and said to Seal, I know Seal, in fact, I could roughly guess your situation at the beginning, so I thought about it for a long time. After that, I contacted an old friend and sent you over during the summer vacation. Quote. Speaking of which, Dumbledore seemed to have remembered something. He couldn't help laughing, and then said, You should know that my old friend is a master of demagoguery, and I originally wanted to rely on him to enlighten you. In the end, what I didn't expect was that it was him who was enlightened. After Dumbledore finished speaking, the old man and the young man looked at each other and laughed together. After all, no one thought that Grindelwald would come out again for Seal in the end. This was something Dumbledore never expected. When he went to see Grindelwald, Dumbledore was actually ready for failure. After the two laughed for a while, Dumbledore continued, "You know what? Shire, your teacher came to see me near Hogwarts a while ago, and we had a profound conversation." Quote. As soon as Dumbledore's voice fell, CL's heart throbbed, for fear that Grindelwald would say something he shouldn't have said. Fortunately, Dumbledore didn't notice CL's little gesture, just smiled, and then continued, "I agree with what Grindelwald said to me. Not only me, but even he found out about your anomaly. But he did not choose to point it out. According to his words, Seal, you have experienced too little, just like a flower protected in a greenhouse. Your magic is strong enough, but I am good, he is good, both or neglect your mental exercise. Fortunately, it's not too late to make up for it, so I called you here mainly to say 3 things. First, Shire, you need to break the seal of Slytherin this semester and look for the inheritance of the Wind of Dorowindclaw. Second, Shire, I need you to help Sirius as much as possible within the rules, so that no bloodshed will happen at Hogwarts this year. Note that the char must be within the rules. Third, I want you to let Pettigrew go after Sirius is vindicated." When he heard Dumbledore's plan, Seal felt that he was left with homework for a while. The first 2 were fine, and Seal could understand it, but after Dumbledore finished the third, Seal said the child reacted, and immediately stood up and retorted loudly. "No, absolutely not on the 3rd day. You don't know what will happen when you let him go." Dumbledore looked at Seal's reaction with a smile and didn't say much. After Seal calmed down, Dumbledore continued, "Voldemort's resurrection. I know Seal, not only do I know, but this is my plan." When Charles heard this and looked at the calm Dumbledore, he didn't know what to say for a while. Is his teacher crazy? Want to resurrect Voldemort? For a while, Seal felt that he should doubt whether the old man in front of him had been cursed by someone. Dumbledore just smiled when he saw Seal's puzzled look, and then continued, "Don't be so surprised at Seal, it's not time yet, you just need to do these 3 things, and I'll tell you later. Your plan with Grindelwald." Seal, on the other hand, looked at Dumbledore on the opposite side with a wary expression on his face. For a while, the battle between heaven and man was in Seal's head. He rationally told Seal that if he obeyed his teacher, there was no doubt that the future would be a bright future. But the road is full of hardships. Sensibility has been urging Seal to veto Dumbledore's mission. This will be a plan that affects everyone around him, and it's almost a matter of overturning if there is no trouble. Looking at Seal at war, Dumbledore continued to speak, "Trust me in Seal, just as I believe in you." Hearing his teacher's words, Seal took a deep breath, and finally his reason prevailed over his sensibility. Seal nodded and replied, "I see, teacher." Hearing Charles's definite answer, Dumbledore smiled even more happily, and then said, "Charles, I will not directly interfere with your decision this semester. You can come to me or all the teachers in the class and ask for any non-excessive measures. Help. But you must remember to pay attention to safety. During these processes, you will come into contact with the darkness of pure blood and the darkness of human nature, but I still hope that you can still find the light after facing the darkness. Remember, Shire, at any time, Grindelwald and I will stand behind you. This is our promise to you from the 2 old men who are about to go to Earth." After hearing this, Charles could only nod his head, but just as he was about to stand up and turn to leave, he suddenly realized something. "Wait. Old Dengtu, how did you find out about Sirius and Pettigrew? How do you know that Pettigrew is bound to resurrect Voldemort?" Seal felt that he had grabbed a bright spot, and looked dangerously at the smiling old man sitting behind the desk. Dumbledore did still look indifferent, looked at Seal, and replied with a smile, "It's very simple, a little experience, a little logic, a little reasoning, and some prophecies." Seal, prophecy is not static, it can only be used as a reference. But it can shed a little light on the darkness of the future. Quote. Hearing Dumbledore's answer, the corners of Seal's mouth twitched. Obviously, after this old man and the prophesying Grindelwald were together, the wisdom of the 2 combined for nearly 3 centuries is really terrifying. At this time, can't imagine how far these 2 old people have calculated. The helpless Seal talked, Okay, teacher, let's not rectify those falsehoods. To be honest, where should I go to find Ms. Ravenclaw's test? Dumbledore smiled and replied, just in the most obvious place, where countless people have found her for thousands of years, but they haven't found her yet. After he finished speaking, regardless of the dazed Seal, he motioned for Seal to hurry back to sleep. It was not until after Seal left that the portraits of the old principals on the wall began to move. Dumbledore, is it too early for you to do this? He's still a child, the portrait on the wall began to discuss. Dumbledore turned to look at the night outside and said, Headmaster Daly's Dewant, I don't have many incidents, I'm very old. After speaking, with a sigh, the entire principal's room returned to its former tranquility.